Hello, everyone, and welcome back once again to the Tetracast. This is RPG Site's weekly podcast where we get the site staff together to talk about our favorite genre of video games. We've got the usual crew here today. I'm your host. My name is Brian Vitale. With me, I have Josh Torres.
Idea Factory won't stop texting me now.
Adam Vitale.
Hello.
And Chaomin Wu.
Hello.
James will be joining us later, hopefully. We'll see if he's able to make time for that. But otherwise, we are recording this on the 10th of September here in the US. It is the 11th in Japan. We are a week, or with less than a week away from Tokyo Game Show. I think some people, including some of us here, have been putting together basically their itinerary of what they're going to pay attention to over the next week. TGS is held between the 15th and the 18th, I believe, of the upcoming week. So, and obviously with the time zone difference and accounted for. So, Josh, I don't know how much you're planning to stay up at ungodly hours for the next week, but I saw that you've been kind of trying to scope out what your plans are for your upcoming scheduling for the next several days, and it looks like it's pretty packed.
It's it's your typical TGS week, so every TGS I kind of just God bless Sal Romano of Gamatsu. They've been doing a fantastic job keeping track of all when things happen during live events on their calendar, on their site. And so I took a look at what the TGS schedule looked like on their site and did some time zone conversions and whatnot. And the Japan time zone with the Pacific in the US they don't really mesh well together. So we'll see what my sleeping schedule looks like this week. I don't know. That's I don't know. It's kind of scary looking at it. I guess we'll talk about it more later. Yeah. Yeah, we'll get into it later. But it's looking to be a pretty packed one as we're getting nearer and nearer, and more companies start announcing what sort of stages and events they're doing at TGS. There's a lot going on this year.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to next week when we're recording on day 3 or 4 of TGS, and you'll be completely sleep deprived. But hopefully, I had some good news to carry you through next week's podcast if you're here.
Yeah, so I should be last week. I wasn't here because bad things happened to my main computer, and I was like, I got that sort of fixed. So thankfully, that's back in working order after a little bit of a catastrophe. And it's kind of been a kind of the calm before the storm almost this week, right? It's there's some things happened. There's some games that came out that are worth talking about. But it's kind of been a slower week because everything's going to be just put into it's going to be a chaos next week. So the only thing this week going on besides a little bit of games here and there is out of nowhere. A few weeks back, we were talking about when that Neptunia Sisters versus Sisters game was announced for localization. Adam and I were talking about how Idea Factory was distributing that news first to people who signed up with their phone numbers, and they would text them about it. So this was on August 11th, and then out of nowhere this week, starting on Thursday, I just get a text out of nowhere from them, from Neptune, saying, "You ever just think about pudding?" ? I'm like, what the fuck? And then yesterday, she's like, "Hey, my sister wants to try my R phone. She's going to give you a call this time tomorrow, okay?" I'm like, "No, don't give me a call." And I didn't get a call unless it was one of those spam phone calls that I ignore. So it could have been that. And then one right before this podcast is from Netgear this time, saying it's my turn to step up. Pre-order Neptunia Sisters versus Sisters at retailers today. And then the fucking link. So yeah, that's other than games, I've just been getting weird texts from Idea Factory trying to call me, I guess. Yeah.
Is that was that something that anyone could sign up for, or was it something that you got access to for having the RPG site outlet?
Anyone could sign up for it, but we could sign up for it early.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, I'm just the privilege of being texted by Netgear. I don't know.
Thank God. Please, God.
Well, hopefully you can unsubscribe. Either that or you get to enjoy the...
I mean, they say on each text you can reply stop in caps to make it stop. And I'm like, I'm already here. Let's see where it goes.
Well, like you said, it has been a quiet week. This week, a little bit less quiet than last week. Last week, we had a good opportunity to talk about some classic games and some smaller pieces of bit news and indie news. We actually have a few kind of heavy hitters and some big announcements this week. Obviously, nothing compared to what's coming up with TGS. But this week, I'm looking at our little podcast outline here, and I don't know, there's a fair bit of things to talk about. And two of these are basically, we're going to be talking about here right up front, is that we obviously are a week plus into September now, and we've got two, mid-tier releases that certain people have been looking forward to in the RPG space, and we're going to be talking about these two up front. Both of these games have reviews up on the site, so as we talk about them, we'll direct you to those reviews as we get to them. But for the first one, we're going to be talking about a game called Steelrising. This is a game that Spider Studio put out a couple days ago, and Adam was able to look at this game and cover it up on the site in a formal review. But before you read that, we figured, hey, we'll give an opportunity to... a lot of times the embargo and the review write-up don't line up so well, where we'll talk about the game one week on the podcast, and the next week we'll say, by the way, we got the review up. Now we have it both up at the same time for this game and the next game we'll talk about. So I'll hand it off to Adam to start out with for this week. So last week, Adam, you played Kuldelka on the sideline as a classic game, but now you also have played through Steelrising as a recent RPG release. What exactly is Steelrising? Because I know it's a little bit of a lower tier title, and what were your thoughts on it?
All right, so in France, in Paris, there's a development company known as Spiders. It's always kind of funny because sometimes they're referred to as Spider Studio, but sometimes they're just called Spiders, which is funny when you put that in like copy, like Spiders have announced. Anyways, they have made quite a few RPGs and have for a while, starting, I don't know, like 10 years ago with like Mars Warlog. Does anyone remember that?
I remember that.
And then they made in the past, not necessarily in order, the Technomancer. They made Bound by Flame. But back in 2019, they released Greedfall. And I think that was the one, that was easily their biggest success. They said so themselves. And people at the time were pretty fond of it, not maybe super polished, not necessarily AAA, but it was a generally well-liked RPG. And many people compared it to like the BioWare style RPG in terms of the quest writing, the character writing, the relationships, and even the combat itself was sort of, it's a little different, but that game did pretty well for itself, and it was by far their biggest success. And
it did so well that it's getting a sequel.
Yeah, exactly. They announced a sequel for it, which is interesting because they announced Steelrising before they announced Greedfall 2. And Steelrising, it's kind of interesting because it kind of goes in the complete other direction as far as RPGs go. Rather than like a narrative, character-based BioWare style RPG, Steelrising is a Souls-like. They refer to it as such. I feel like in the past it was sort of cringy to compare games to Dark Souls, but like it's its own genre now, and they literally just call it, hey, we're making a Souls-like. So that's obviously a bit different in terms of style of game, in terms of less so focused on the characters and the questing, and it's more real time, stamina based. All the stamina based combat, all the things you expect from a Souls-like game, and it has all the same, features. Like, for example, you pick up essences that act as souls that you can spend to level up your character or spend as currency. There are Vestals, which are basically bonfires, which you use to basically heal your character, but also respawn the enemies, around you. So all those same systems. Now, Steelrising, in terms of its setting, like I said, Spiders is a French studio, so it's very apt that they make this game that is basically an alternate take on the French Revolution. So you're set in the late 1700s, and you play as an automaton, a robot named Aegis, and you are basically in the employ of Marie Antoinette, and you are your backstory is a little bit mysterious at the start in terms of like, where did you come from? Why are you a robot? But you're tasked with basically stopping the mechanoid army of the tyrannical King Louis XVI. I think I got the number right. And you aren't really given a whole lot of like premise beyond that at the start. You're just kind of like dropped in the game world and they say go. and there you go.
Yeah, but
And
one
then,
of the things that like struck out to because I watched some footage of this from other streams as well. Like when you start the game, there's like a pretty lengthy intro cutscene, and then like there were like one of the automaton that doesn't fall under like the evil army or whatever. Like she's our only hope left. It's like there's like a create a character aspect to it in the beginning too, because like it's sort of like in Souls, you take like a starting class, and like you're starting like arsenal as well.
yeah, so the character creation system is a little bit limited. Like it's not super in depth in terms of how many different ways you can build your Aegis, but you do get to pick between 1 of 4 classes, and I don't remember them off the top of my head here. There's like a ranged based class. There's one that's more based on like afflictions, which I'll get to later. There's like I did the heavy weapons class, which is basically big hammer. Because I'm basic.
I remember there was a dancer with like war fans and I think an alchemist. I don't know what they do, but yeah.
But in a lot of Souls, like the starting class is just kind of like a starting stat spread, but then it doesn't really like by the time you're soul level 15 or 20, like you can kind of tune it to be wherever you want. Like your starting class matters less the further you're in. Now I know that's kind of hard to judge when you've only got a single playthrough, but I assume that it's not like, oh darn, I should have picked the sword class instead of the hammer class. Now I'm screwed.
Obviously I've only played through the game once, but it seems to be just that where you pick up your starting class. You'll basically be given certain weapons to start with, in my case a big hammer. But not only can you like buy other weapons with your essences if you want, you'll find plenty of other weapons along the way. So if you picked the heavy weapons class like I did, but for some reason you decided, you know what, I really like the fan weapons, you can start using fan weapons and you can change your stat spread to maybe be more suited for that or whatever. So yeah, it's just kind of like a starting, stat sheet, and then you can adjust it from there, and you're not like locked into it for the game. Took me about 20 to 25 hours, I think, something like that. So it's not super long for an RPG, but anyways, so the game itself, it's a little bit faster for a game of its style, I think, in terms of like your motion and how fast you move through the city and things like that. Probably the biggest, most unique, there's 2 components to it that I would say are like its gimmicks, how it stands out. One is a cooldown system. So you're a robot, right? And when you run out of stamina, typically you just have to like back off for a bit, wait for it to refill, and then go back at it, because everything you do costs stamina, whether it's like a sidestep or a block or an attack, right? But here, once your stamina depletes completely, you can press a button to basically activate a cooldown, and there's a timing to it. You have to time it properly, and if you time it perfectly, your stamina bar will refill all the way instantly, and you'll take a little bit of ice damage as like a trade-off, because you're cooling yourself down. So it sort of reminds me of the key pulses in Neo. Not quite the same as that. That was more like timing your attacks and whatnot, but you kind of have to time a pulse, if you will, a cooldown. And if you time it right, you can get all your stamina back, and that allows you, if you can time like multiple in a row, to really keep up the assault and manage your stamina well.
Does the timing get more difficult every time you like chain them together?
It doesn't.
Oh.
But the thing is, you can't time it too many times, because if you do, you literally will freeze yourself.
Oh, that's funny. Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was wondering, like, there's got to be some like constraint on abusing it.
Well, the thing is, if you mistime it poorly, you'll be depleted for stamina even longer than you would have been had you just not timed it at all.
Yeah, this reminds me of the active reload system from Gears of War, when you reload a weapon in that game, there's like a little pip that you have to perfectly time in a certain area to refill all your bullets at once. But if you mistime it, it'll take a little bit longer to do the reload.
But like, for example, one of the bosses I was fighting, I knocked him down with my hammer. You can do like a charge attack, and that knocks a lot of things down. And I was very lucky, or maybe skilled, or maybe both, to like keep timing my cooldowns properly, and I could just keep knocking him down in like an endless, lock, if you will, and he couldn't get back up, and I beat him very quickly, just because of basically this cooldown system. So if you get good at it, I don't want to say it trivializes the game, but it basically works very strongly in your favor. And you can even get upgrades to make the damage that you take from the cooldown minimal. so you can do it more frequently or more often or for a longer period of time. So that's one of the ways which I think, this game sort of sets itself apart. The other way is less so combat and more so traversal. There's I know someone out there is gonna cringe at what I'm about to say, but there's a slight Metroidvania element to this.
Wow, we're using Souls-like and Metroidvania in the same game discussion.
It's the easiest way just to get a general picture of the description here. So as you work your way through the game, after defeating certain story bosses, you unlock skills that basically expand your traversal arsenal. And like, for example, one of them is a hook shot, or a grappling hook, if you will, where like, okay, now you have a grappling hook, and now there are several places throughout the city that you can access with the grappling hook. Both, obviously progressing through the game, you're going to need it. But if you, backtrack through earlier areas, not only does it allow like shortcuts, like, oh, now I can get over from this area to this area much more quickly than I could before, now that I have the grappling hook, but also, unlocks new areas you couldn't get to before at all. There's also, you also get a skill to basically knock down like these kind of broken walls. Like before they were just kind of in the way, but then you can eventually learn a skill to knock them down. And there's another, it's like an air dash. A lot of games have this where you kind of jump and press a button and kind of like dash forward to like expand your jumping capability. And there's a little bit of platforming throughout the game also. There is a jump button. A lot of Souls games don't have that. Elden Ring had a jump button, right?
Yeah, Elden Ring and Sekiro were the actual From Software games.
There's a jump button. So there is a little bit of platforming. It's not great, but luckily there's not a lot. But there are some places where it's like, hey, you need to jump from this building, from this rooftop to this rooftop to get somewhere and maybe find an item or a quest or whatnot. So throughout the game, kind of the main thing that you're doing is you learn relatively quickly that King Louis has 7 titans, is what they're called. They're like the bigger machines. And these machines are powered by a live person. And these are people from, French, the French Revolution history, kind of like an alternate, version of them, historical fiction version of them. Like, for example, one of them is Robespierre. And there's a character named Mirabeau, who I know is based on a real person. I'm not an expert on the French Revolution, sorry. There's like Jean Raymond, and things like that. I think I got his name right.
How do you feel about the setting in general? Because this is kind of betraying like my impression, but like maybe I'm just basic. But when I first saw that this was set in like an alternate history, 1700s French Revolution, like characters in powdered wigs and things like that, I don't really like mesh with it. Like I don't know, if I'm just basic, but I'm like, maybe I prefer if it were more cyberpunky or more post-apocalyptic or even just more medieval fantasy. It's just like the time period that it is set in. I just have a hard time watching like the marketing or the trailers for it and getting super excited. I don't know if you felt the same way or if you meshed with it pretty well, or if maybe like the voice acting helps elevate it a bit. Just how you feel just about like the setting of the game and the premise.
Well, this is where I kind of have to think like, okay, this is a game set in France from French developers. So they're probably a lot more in tune with these characters than we are. Like, I don't know, like Assassin's Creed 3 for us, we see like all the, the revolutionary, historical figures that we're all aware of as Americans, but to other people in Europe, they're like, oh yeah, these dorks. And I don't know if I felt that way towards these, but you are meeting these basically fictionalized versions of these French historical figures. And to me, it's like, oh yeah, I've heard of some of these people, very briefly or here and there. I did have the problem where they all wear similar attire and have similar haircuts. I'm like, wait, who is he again? And so you're like the doctor and you're like the general. And so I kind of forgot, it took me a bit to remember who was who exactly, because they're not super distinct in how they look. I think the voice acting is actually pretty good. I have to be honest though, I probably would have played this game in French, like French dub, if it was offered, because like, why not? French game developed by French people set in France, why not? But it's not. It's just in English for whatever reason.
Is English the only voiceover?
Yes.
Okay.
It does that thing which is, I get why, but it's a little bit silly where they mostly speak in English, but then like every other sentence they'll throw in French words.
Oh man, that's always weird when they do that, especially when it's like their native tongue too.
Yeah, and it's subtitled, where like where one thing I liked about Greedfall, and this is not quite the same topic, but one thing I liked about Greedfall is the native language in that game, which is made up. They did not subtitle it. You learn from context what those words mean when you play the game, and it's really cool. It's actually one of the biggest strengths of that game.
I agree. As a person who reviewed Greedfall for the site, I actually really love that. I know it's a tangent here, but they would use proper nouns that are these made-up words, this made-up language, and they would not tell you what it meant. You just had to say like, "Oh, that refers to this," or "That's something that they say with this sort of greeting or goodbye." So it's interesting they take French and from what I saw when you were streaming it, like some pretty common French terms, and like just translating them, like, oh, we can't possibly let the player.
It. Like for example, they'll just say like "mes amis," and it's like "my friends." Like, oh, thanks. Like I couldn't have deciphered that. Like I couldn't have deciphered that on my own. It's a little bit silly. I will say, small thing. The facial animation is not like AAA, but it's improved. That was probably one of the weaker points of Greedfall, is that it's, some of the polish in the animations aren't as good as, Cyberpunk or whatever, in terms of faces
I don't know about
character models.
I know what you mean, but just like talk about polish and talk about Cyberpunk, I'm like,
well,
oh, wait,
Cyberpunk's
what?
like character models,
yeah,
like in cutscenes and things, right?
Yes, when you specify that makes sense. But I don't know, just hearing polish and Cyberpunk in the same sentence, I'm just like, oh, okay, we gotta set the
specifically referring to like character model animations. They're a little bit better here.
Yeah,
I do like the animations on like kind of like the jerky movements of the automaton that you use. Like it's supposed to be robotic. It's supposed to be a bit janky. So maybe in the way they contextualize, some of the more raw, like sudden weird animations like you normally wouldn't see a human body do, but for an automaton or robot, like it's very like kind of stiff at points, and it's kind of like jerky at points that I kind of do like. It's like these aren't like high fidelity androids like you would see like in your automata, for example.
They're like steampunk androids almost.
They almost have like doll joints almost in the way they animate.
Both of the animation, I was also like when you use like a flask, for instance. I don't even remember what they call flasks in this game, a birette. Aegis will literally like bend her arm like backwards, like in an impossible pose grab it from her back or whatever, to use it. I think it's like an oil barrette, like you're literally like oiling yourself to heal yourself. But in terms of the game's like flaws, as you save these people from their Titan, they kind of convene these historical figures, and they give you quests, and they're just like side quests in any RPG. They're listed in your log. You get a waypoint. You get an objective to achieve and whatnot, and these quests aren't very good. I feel like that's easy to say about quests, but it's really a lot of them are just like go to this place and interact with a thing and come back, and then you finish it, and it's like almost the value in the quest is almost just that you sometimes get access to an area you weren't in before, which is sort of cool, and like a small little area. But the quest itself is almost like I feel like 80% of them are just like interact with this thing elsewhere and return to me, and it's just. I don't know. It wasn't very interesting from a gameplay perspective. It wasn't very interesting from a character or story perspective. It really kind of felt like it was just there to almost like fill a box on a checklist. Like, yep, we have quests. So I didn't really care for those. The bosses kind of all felt similar to me. The main bosses, in that obviously their like visual design is a little bit different, but they all kind of had like a similar pattern where it's like they will all do like a very obviously told charge attack of some sort, where it's like very, very well flagged to you. Like
here comes
this
the
is when you attack.
Avoid this.
Yeah, here's where you dodge, and here's your opening to attack right now. And it's just kind of like they all kind of have that same sort of pattern to it. And the game is not super hard, and I'll get back to that later. But the bosses were a little bit disappointing. Even to the point where Josh was actually watching me sort of do this. I fought the final boss of the game. I didn't know it was the final boss of the game. I knew I was like in the final stretch, but I was sort of thinking this was like, oh, this is like the penultimate boss. Like this is the warm up or whatever. It didn't really feel like a final boss from like a story perspective. It didn't like appear like it from a battle perspective. It just kind of felt like any of the other bosses I felt. So I was kind of like, okay, let me beat this guy first and see what happens. And then I got the credits, like, oh, that was it. okay, I wasn't expecting that, and that's never a good thing. Where you kind of didn't even realize you beat the game until the credits
Now, Adam,
hit.
I know you haven't played Demon Souls, which you should. But it has a very, and I'm trying not to spoil it, but it has a very famous final boss where it's designed in a very particular way to feel different from a typical climax. I don't know if maybe is that the intent here, like, oh, it was supposed to kind of take you by surprise, or was it not? If it was supposed to be that, it didn't quite click in that way.
I'm not sure. It didn't. I don't think it was in terms of storytelling or whatever. Like, I assume Demon Souls, which I've sort of heard of, I assume there's like a story reason for it or a thematic reason for it.
Yeah, we'll say thematic.
Just,
yeah,
but here it's just kind of like, oh, that's that was just like the final boss of 14 Louis. Now the thing is also like a little wrinkle to this. One of like the major villains, slight spoiler, you don't really conclude with him in the story here. But the thing is, there's a DLC that's already been announced that has his name on it. So it's kind of like, oh, that's probably going to be, taken care of in the DLC. So that's why that story thread didn't really wrap up here. So that kind of feels a little awkward. Where
that's the worst type of DLC where it's like, we've already announced it. There's clearly like feelers for it in the main game. It's like, are you ready to have the privilege of giving us $9.99 for the figure out how this part ends? I don't know.
Yeah, the DLC is called like Cagliostro Uprising or something. Cagliostro is the guy.
So Adam, I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Since you were wondering, like, if it would be like the type of game where you can like load up your save after the game if you want to tie up any loose ends. How did this game handle it?
There's other things I want to talk about, but I'll also talk about this. So I don't know if this is a glitch or not. It feels like a glitch, where I beat the game, and when you enter like the final area in the game, I should mention before that, the game's world is kind of like separated into like 8 separate sections. So they're like levels, if you will. Not quite like Neo-based levels, but it's just like the world is not like a big seamless world. It's like you go from 8 different sections of Paris that are kind of separated from each other. But as you enter the last section of the game, like the final part, the game even warns you that this is the final section of the game. You can't return to do quests or whatnot after this point. And I was like, sure, I'm ready to go. And then at the time, I just quickly glanced that the game, like the UI, popped up a message saying like creating a save for future use, or something along those lines. Like, oh, okay, so it's like creating like a point here that I can return to, I suppose, before the final boss. I guess that sort of makes sense. It was something like that. And so I did the final level, and I beat the final boss, again, kind of surprisingly. And then it's after the credits, it shoots me back to the main menu, right? And I'm like, all right, let me load up my save and see like what it does. Because I know sometimes these games will automatically like throw you in a new game plus. Sometimes it's like a point before the final boss or whatnot. I load up my save, and it shows my character for like a second, and then it like fades to black, and then the credits roll. It feels very awkward. And then it shoots me back to the main menu again. I'm like, oh, if I load my save again, it'll show my character again for just a second, load the credits, and then back to the main menu. So I don't know if that doesn't feel like intended behavior to me.
It could be some weird consequence or artifact of the pre-release status.
Might be. Yeah, it might just be because I had pre-release code, but I'm pretty sure there is supposed to be a new game plus.
And then this is like also this game only has like a single save slot, right?
Yeah, you can't make saves. Like obviously for a game like this, you can't.
Souls like, yeah.
Yeah, you can't save the game yourself manually. It's just kind of saved for you as you proceed. You only get one file. So literally, like, if I wanted to play this game again, I have to start over. I mean, no new game plus, no post game for me. It's because my save file just loads the credits and shoots you back out.
You won't be able to figure out what happened to Calistro or whatever.
Nope.
Not that.
Another thing I wanted to mention. Another thing I wanted to mention was the world design, like aesthetically and structurally. You're set in Paris, so there's a lot of Parisian streets. But the thing is they kind of all like look the same and blend together, and it makes it really hard to know where you're going. I feel like a good game of this style, even if you don't have a map, there's no map, like a UI map or anything like that. usually have like landmarks or point or vistas or something that's like that helps you kind of get your bearings, know where you are. But in this game, there's a lot of just like city streets with samey looking buildings and samey looking roads, so it can be very tricky to actually know like where am I exactly. Because it all looks so similar. There are a few places like around some of the palaces that look a little bit cooler, but otherwise it's a lot of roads and also a few gardens. So I kind of feel like the level design isn't great in terms of, landmarks, in terms of knowing where you are. The game, there is an optional like waypoint system where it actually points out like, hey, if you want to proceed with the main story, it kind of like points you in that direction with like a flag. But it's like, it doesn't actually tell you how to get to it. You just kind of have to navigate the streets to figure out how. And it still can sometimes be a little tricky to realize like, oh, this is a building I can enter and leave from the other side and get to from street A to street B, or to street C. And it's just kind of, it's a little bit too samey for me. But otherwise, I think that covers most of the main things I have on this game. So I came away from the game, satisfied. Like, it's an okay game. It's decent. It looks pretty nice, I think, for a game of this caliber and from a studio like this. But otherwise, I don't think it's like stands out really strongly from the myriad of other Souls likes. Not too much, but
no, thanks for covering it. And yeah, I know some people, it's like Greedfall ended up kind of being like more highly regarded and more successful than I think that they were anticipating, which is obviously like we talked about why they did a sequel. And then I think people were like, oh, a Souls like. And it sounds like you think the game is fine, but it's kind of a crowded genre where a lot of developers and a lot of really talented studios have jumped on. So this game's going to be hard to stand out. So, but I don't know. I'm happy covering it here at the start of a podcast as something that's just kind of a curiosity as we wait for the heavy hitters at late September to land. And like I mentioned at the start of this podcast, I was just going to mention that you do have the written review up on the site where you've got your thoughts, more formally written down and criticized out.
Yeah, when Steelrising was first announced, it was kind of weird at the time because like this seems like to be going the complete direction opposite of Greedfall in terms of what people liked about that game. That seems like a weird choice. But then later they announced Greedfall 2, so it's like, oh, okay. Even if you're not big into Souls likes, there's a Greedfall 2 coming that's presumably going to be similar to the first and hopefully better. I should mention that that's actually a prequel. It's called Greedfall 2, but it's a prequel to Greedfall in terms of its story. One last thing I want to mention about Steel. Yeah, one last thing I want to mention about Steelrising, which I think is cool, and of course has caused a shitstorm on the Steam forums because, of course, what doesn't cause a shitstorm on the Steam forums?
I have no idea what you're about to say, but
the game has an assist mode. Yeah, and the assist mode is pretty varied, not like super varied, but there's a couple of different options you have, including you can just simply put on a damage reduction. Like, I want to take 50% less damage, you can do it. I want to take 100% less damage, you can do it. Yeah, this game has a god mode if you want to use it, which I think is fine. Honestly, the games used to have god modes all the time. And if you were just the type of game who are maybe interested in the setting or the developer world and you just want to play it but you don't care about Souls-likes, I think this is perfect for those types of people.
And I didn't use it. It's optional
and things like that. Yeah, it does disable some achievements, but like it's totally optional. I think it's just a good option to have. You can also adjust things like your stamina and a few other things I don't recall off the top of my head. But there is an assist mode in place to basically, if you just want to experience the game and not have to worry too much about the I don't think it's that difficult, but if you just don't want to worry about it, it's there for you. It's completely optional.
If the developers want there to be a mode like that, then that by all means, that's fine. Like I'm of the opinion that like developers should have the freedom to like do like whatever sort of options they want in the game like this, and like whether they want to be like the intended experience or want it to be like a tailored experience like that. Like I think like developers shouldn't have to like suffer shit one way or the other of options they decide to put in or not to put in like that, right? Like the spiders shouldn't get shit for like deciding to include a god mode for people who want to play it like that and have fun with it, and like in the same way that like From Software shouldn't have to go through shit like of people wanting like an easy mode on their games because like they each both of those development teams are very different and like they have like different goals and different intentions of like how they want the player to experience the game, and that should be okay.
Yeah,
So the
it's
other
not
things the assist
a
mode has
contradiction.
is one of the assist mode things is if you die, you keep your essence. And another one is that it makes the cooling easy. I don't know exactly what that means, but it makes the cooling system easy. So that's that.
My guess
That's,
is increases like the input window for that cooldown mechanic that you talked about, or something like that.
Yeah, I imagine. I was just saying, yeah, I certainly needed some easy cooling in Southern California this week. Thankfully, it did get there, but with cloudy and gray weather, no sun in sight. But the beginning of the weekend or late last week was but the temperatures were not good here, so I wanted that cooling.
Well, obviously, go ahead and give Steelrising review up on rpgsite.net a read. And as I mentioned, we also had another early September release that also got a review up on the site. And this one I'm going to hand off to Josh to lead the discussion. And this is for Made in Abyss, Binary Star Falling into Darkness. Now, obviously, we talked about this game a few times in like late July, early August, as it was doing its final ramp up marketing before its release. I believe that I know at least Adam decided to watch the original series ahead of this game. I don't know if independently of the game or just on his own. But a game for a kind of a well-known, iconic anime series that I have not seen. We've kind of had a few impressions about what the marketing looked like and how the game was shaping up before release. But now that the game has been out and Josh has been able to play through it and review it, we'll see about how our preconceptions were either met or not met. So, Josh, Made in Abyss, Binary Star Falling into Darkness. I don't know if you were originally planning to review this, but long story short, you ended up doing that.
Yeah, so I decided, yeah, I might as well. I was like, sure, why not? Like, I'm really into Made in Abyss again because I've been following the new episodes of season 2, and I've been really having a great time. So I was like, this is a great timely release of this game because interest in Made in Abyss is like at its peak right now because of the success of season
new
2.
Anime,
yeah. Made in Abyss, Binary Star, Falling to Darkness is the kind of anime, not the anime, the like the game tie-in that has like two different modes that we've been talking about. One is called Hello Abyss, and one is called Deep in Abyss. One follows like a little bit of the anime storyline, I think the beginnings of it, and while the other mode is following an original character. What I didn't know going to this, and I think the marketing was a little deceptive on this, um, was that the Hello Abyss that follows the source material is very much kind of a tutorial in disguise for this game. It lasts under 3 hours. I was very surprised at how short this was, and this is following like the very beginning of Rico and Reg's journey. These are the two main characters of Made in Abyss. So it starts like for people who don't know the world of Made in Abyss, the the gist of it is that it all takes place on this island with a surrounding town called Orth, and like this town is kind of like circular in shape that encompasses like a really huge, gigantic hole chasm in the ground that just extends out pretty much endlessly. It's called the Abyss, um, and like there are layers to the Abyss that as you descend further and further and further down, it gets difficult to climb back up. But the just for now, just know that like this abyss has like layers to it, and like the geography, the wildlife, kind of like the scenery, the imagery in between these layers are very different, and so forth. And
I'm sure you're getting to this, but like, what is the motivation for delving into this abyss?
So for travelers that like they're known as cave raiders, who want to explore this abyss, like a lot of them, the main goal is to get relics, to bring up back to the surface and like get money off of the relics, and that's how they get prestige, how they get wealth, and the deeper down you go, the more valuable relics there are. So there's like a kind of like a challenge to it of like, hey, I want to push myself and really retrieve these rare relics down at the bottom, and like I'll obviously be more wealthy in the end. So some other people just like want to do it for a challenge. Some other people just want to do it like for kind of general curiosity. Reasons that pertain to that. And but it's kind of a weird thing in the abyss, and I'll expand on this further. But climbing and descending down further into this abyss, makes it really, really difficult to get back up. It's easier going down than it is coming up because um, when you're ascending at any time in the abyss, there's this kind of like a thin like force field barrier called the Curse of the Abyss. And like when people start ascending the abyss, like moving vertically up in it, whether it's like walking up a slope, going up a stairs, just generally climbing up, they'll start to feel the effects of the curse. Like in the early layers, it'll be like slight nausea, headache, some numbness. It's kind of like when you're like taking a road trip and going up like a mountain, like you'll start feeling a little bit sick, like that. While in deeper layers, when you're trying to ascend in that, it becomes kind of a bit of a bigger deal because you'll start getting things like hallucinations. You'll start bleeding out in like all sorts of places in your body. You'll start like losing like sensory deprivation, and those like just the effects of that curse will become more and more severe. That's kind of just like the general like world building of this, like the story. That's not like a spoiler or anything. That's just
it's like a magical force field that you can go down no problem, but like kind of come like a one-way force field almost. Trying to come back through it, you basically have to like swim through a curse, if you will.
Yeah. It's kind of like it's kind of like one of those oh man, what's a good it's like one of those holes that like it's easy to like push through it, but then you're trying to like get out of that hole. It's like there's like you're a bit more resistance.
You know those like Chinese finger traps?
Yes,
sort of like that.
Yeah,
like you can push them together easy, and pulling it apart, you cannot do it. I know it's like the weirdest comparison, but it's sort of like that.
Yeah,
basically, you can go down easy, you can't come back up easy.
Yeah. So in Binary Star, in the Hello Abyss, like I said, it's Rico and Reg's beginnings, how Rico met Reg, and then her time at the orphanage that she stays at. For people who watch the anime, it roughly ends at episode 8 of season 1, where Rico and Reg descend into the third layer of the abyss. After
is that like halfway through, or just
a little over halfway through season 1 alone? Gotcha. So this does not touch upon anything like at the last batch of episodes in season 1. This does touch upon like movie 3 of Beta Abyss, which acts as a sequel to season 1, and it doesn't have any content from season 2. Obviously, because of like how development of this game was made years in advance before season 2 aired. So I did. It was kind of weird because another significant character that you meet in season 1, Nanachi, she like becomes like kind of like the third main character, but like the Hello Abyss mode in this doesn't even get to the part where Rico and Reg meet Nanachi in their story mode. So it's a kind of teaches you the very basics of how this game operates. Where this game is like a mix of a survival game and action RPG, and it teaches you stuff like, hey, you gather materials as you like take trips into the abyss. You can craft them. You don't have to do a crafting table. You can do all the crafting on your character as long as they have like the materials with them in their backpack. The backpack has a weight limit, so you have to be very picky about what you decide to pick up and what you decide to keep with you, because there's a very strict weight limit, and once you breach that weight limit in your backpack, your character will pretty much they'll move very, very, very slowly, like not even worth being overburdened at all. And that things will have durability. But in the Hello Abyss mode, it's kind of like a very, very, very easy mode, and that is like not a good representation of like the actual difficulty curve of the game, because in the Hello Abyss mode, since you have Reg with you, Reg is like an amnesiac robot boy who can like detach his like arms, like kind of like a when he can like fling off his arm, and like it's kind of like a rope attached to him. So like in the actual game with their
I feel really stupid because I did not realize Reg was a robot.
Yeah, I know.
I thought he was just like stylized.
No, he's a robot boy.
Okay, he's a robot boy. Today,
but people do comment like, "Oh, you're a robot, but you look so human." That's good. Like, do you even comment on that? So yes, that like a big part of like the overarching story of Made in Abyss is like, who is Reg then? Like, where did Reg come from? Like, why was he made? Who made him? Etc. Right? So, that's this game doesn't touch on any of that because like it doesn't that's much further in the series.
That's one of like the long lingering things
Yeah.
is who is Reg. It's not like like that's actually not really the main like thrust of the story. That's Rico's story, but there's also like Reg is just a mysterious robot. Where is he from? So it's kind of like a side like lingering long term thing.
Yeah, the main overarching story, as you mentioned, is like Rico's mom is like a legendary cave raider who is like who has the white whistle rank, and like these there's like for cave raiders in Main Abyss, like the whistles are sort of like the like promotions essentially. So like she's like at the top whistle rank, she can explore all of the abyss because like formally like to explore deeper layers of the abyss you have to like reach certain whistle ranks to do so because it'll like signify okay you're experienced enough to like tackle this layer. It's sort of like a safety measure as well. So like the story in Mid Abyss was Rico's searching for her mom. She doesn't know where she is. Like she knows she knows that her mom is in the abyss, and just mysteriously one day at the very beginning, she gets a letter supposedly from her mom. Someone retrieved it from the abyss, and like saying, "Hey, I'm waiting down at the bottom just for you." And then that's what the letter basically says. And Rico's like, "I have to go see with my two eyes. What the hell happened to my mom? Where is she?" So she, kind of illegally makes a trip into the abyss with Reg with no intent of going back up, because she wants to like find her mom. That's kind of the main objective in that, the source material. So, like I was saying, Reg pretty much kind of automates a lot of the survival elements for you in Hello Abyss because when you're going down the abyss, there'll be like points where you can like put down rope, but you in this mode you don't have to use rope that you like made or bought with you because Reg has that detachable arm and you can just like use them freely to like kind of descend for you. And then like for any combat encounters, you don't have to like worry about using like your tools because each of your tools have a durability meter. And I know a lot of people are going to think of Breath of the Wild, and yes, that's very much like there are other games that have durability meters, but a lot of people think of Breath of the Wild when it comes to durability on their tools and weapons. So instead of like you using your tools to fight for you, can have Reg fight for you. He kind of bashes everything easily. But even in this Hello Abyss mode, like all your tools have like pretty much infinite durability if you want to get in on the action yourself. While in the main mode, it's very much that's not the case. So it pretty much teaches you like kind of the basic like UI of the game. So
I don't know. From an outsider's perspective, that seems pretty clever to me. Just a way to introduce the systems in a more interesting way. That's not just like tutorial mode explicitly.
So
I think it was just like not really
marketed.
The blunt way to put it wasn't like marketed properly, but it felt like it was like, hey, this is where you can follow the story, but it's only like not even like half the story, just like a teaser of the story as a tutorial. So it's just a little bit like like setting expectations of what it actually is.
And I think it also kind of it kind of like doesn't really represent like the survival aspect for you because like once you get into like the main OC story mode, because you need to do this mode, this Hello Abyss mode first to even unlock that. And here's where you make like you make your own character. It's an original thing that like your protagonist is like this traveler that ventured into Earth, and like they want to become a cave raider and get their white whistle. That's kind of the bare bones, like the basic story they have. Or that you do have their game original characters where you kind of meet like your posse and your friends that you met in the orphanage that Rico stayed at, and like you kind of work up the way to the ranks. But once you actually start getting to like the gameplay of that mode, is like when you're actually thinking about like, oh shit, this is not like when you go into Hello Abyss and when you swing a weapon, it's like, oh, I really don't have to worry about durability because like it seems like the durability doesn't really decrease that much. While in the real mode, you're like, oh my god, like one swing of like my pickaxe on like an enemy like will take off like 1/10 of the durability meter. So like I can't really swing this that much, and I have to start thinking about like, should I bring additional pickaxes with me? Should I bring hatchets instead because they're a little bit lighter, but in exchange they do less damage? and they kind of don't have as much durability as pickaxes. And it's a very much a big balancing act, and definitely like you have to start thinking about, okay, once this tool breaks, it'll free up more weight on my backpack for me. So you're just like thinking about more things that like the Hello Abyss mode didn't really teach you about. Like it kind of babied you through it without like telling you anything else. It never really set a proper expectations, and I think that kind of what makes Hello Abyss a bad first. What it gave me a bad first impression, because I was really hoping that I was hoping this would be really lean into the more survival aspect, and it does, but you won't know that until you get into that mode yourself. Like if you had no prior knowledge of that, because when I was going through like the source material mode, following the manga anime story, I was like, this feels a little bit boring, to be honest, and I didn't realize then that in the OC mode, it's like, okay, this is where it really, really starts, because like even in the OC mode, you didn't have access to the skill trees in the anime story mode. While in the OC story mode, this is where you see the skill tree for the first time. There's like separate skill trees for like combat, for crafting, for learning new like crafting recipes for cooking and making tools. A skill tree for like making like your climbing faster, reducing less stamina, resistances against different kinds of poisons, expanding your weight limit, expanding your storage box slots, and all that. So, and the skill trees, you gain a skill point every time you level up, and you don't level off of like beating up monsters. You only level up from completing quests and successfully retrieving relics from the abyss and getting them appraised at the relic appraisal NPC. So it's not something you can't really grind levels for monsters. You do it like through either main story quests or like the free quests that like the guild gives you.
In general, I like games that give you like, I always think of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, where you only get EXP for completing quests. So that way, if you take it non-violent,
Vampire the Masquerade.
There you go.
Well, no, I know it's kind of crossing genres.
That actually came to mind when I was thinking too. I like that.
It's a smart solution to be like, if someone wants to play more non-combatively or stealthily or avoid or passively, they're not penalized for it.
Yeah, and that's very much like kind of the Maiden Mess's MO, where like combat is like, don't engage in it unless you absolutely need to. It like kind of actively discourages it, because of like, hey, there's only a certain lifespan on your tools, and you're really only engaging in combat if you need like monster drops to like cook something or to craft a tool that you need, and that's just like all knowledge that you gain for yourself. Like, hey, once I beat up this monster, what can it drop? Oh, it drops a certain type of meat that I can use for cooking, and so forth. So you're not really beating up like many monsters, like every monster that you come across, because they respawn pretty regularly as well. So there's like no reason to like kind of engage in combat frequently in this game. So you kind of start opening up all these like systems, and like in the skill tree, you don't have access to the entire skill tree. Like certain sections of it will be gated off until you like reach a certain whistle rank. So you go through the story, you revisit pretty much all the places that Rico and Reg did. So a lot of like the first few hours of it is a lot of like environments that you've already seen from the first layer and the second layer of the Abyss. So, and then like it made an Abyss fashion, this is a pretty dark story where like it's already kind of like a grim world, where a lot of the cave raiders that you meet early on are just like little kids. These are all little kids from an orphanage, and the orphanage trains them to become cave raiders to get relics and make them money.
It's quite literally like child labor, and since they're orphans, no one will care if they die.
Yeah, and then there are cave raiders that are adults as well that you meet in the story.
But there are factions that are using these kids and literally exploiting them. So.
Yes, yeah. So it's not a happy-go-lucky story, and just like in Made Out of His Fashion, it's a very visually intense. This has the top like Zero Z rating in Japan, because like there are certain sequences in it, like especially like when you die to certain monsters, you're just shown a very gruesome death. Like the one example I gave in my review is there's this a monster called the Corpse Weeper in the second layer, where when it kills someone, it'll feed on their like intestines, and as they're feeding on their intestines, they're like mimicking their death cries as they're feeding on them. So like any person around that like hears it will think that someone is in danger and kind of like asking help from anyone around, and they're lured in by that, and then once they come into there not knowing it, it's like, oh, there's the next place for the corpse sweeper to feed on them and then mimic their death cries. And that's like shown in the game. If you die to that creature, you just see like your little OC kids innards kind of being fed upon as the monster is feeding on them. And there's also like certain like quick time events, even like in Hello Abyss mode, or like if you miss a QTE, like you're shown a pretty gruesome death. Like there's like an early QTE where Reg fires his incinerator, which is like a big laser from his hand for the first time. And if you miss that QTE, like you see that laser kind of like misfire on Rico getting swept up in it. And it's like, oh shit. And he's like, and after that you see Reg like traumatized that he missed, and it's like, damn. So yeah, so just know that going in that like this is a pretty visually intense game as well when it comes to deaths. So as you're descending down the abyss with your OC, like you kind of meet more like the characters that are from the source material. You meet Ozen, Maraluk, and then it'll once you enter the layers that the Hello Abyss mode doesn't cover. That's when you'll meet like people like Nanachi, and then like you'll see that Rico and Reg have already descended into the abyss, because the OC story mode picks up right after when they like descend into the third abyss in Hello Abyss. And then this game will go up to the fifth layer, and you'll meet characters like Bondrude, who's a very, very popular character in that series. And it's a pretty demanding game when it comes to survival, because there's a lot of the quests in the game are like very much fetch quests, or try to find this character in the story, progress the story, help them out with what they need. Helping to search for like missing cave raiders, and like a lot of the story stuff is kind of like whatever, who cares? But I think the main allure for this game is for people who really like the hardcore survival aspect of Made in Abyss, because while the game's character models are they're very visually not great. They're like I mentioned in my review. It's something like these character models are something you would see like in
a PS3 game.
Yeah, like it'd be like from past generation consoles. You would see these character models, but like the environments themselves are pretty okay. Like because they evoke that Made in Abyss imagery. They'd use that, like the changing environments as you go deeper into the abyss well in the game. And I think a lot of like the atmosphere that it exudes is like pretty well made for Made in Abyss fans, but they have to be really in that specific mood of like being in that world, being surrounded by like hostile creatures and feeling alone, because that's most of the scenarios that you'll find yourself in that game. And so it's a lot of resource management and trying to plan out like, okay, I can only do this much in this run for the abyss, and like because I start to think about my resources to make the journey back up. And the wrinkle to this, and the one thing that like really separates Binary Star from other survival games, is what we were talking about earlier, is the Curse of the Abyss mechanic. And this is represented in the game as well, where anytime you're in the abyss, no matter what layer you're in, if you even move up for like a few inches for a few seconds, you'll start getting this hazy purple aura around, like surrounding the screen, and then it'll start like alerting you like with a distinct sound effect and like distinct visual effects that like, hey, the curse is creeping up on you. And you also have like a depth gauge meter as well at the top center of your screen that'll continually go red, deep red, and like if you let that like keep on going without like taking a break and like just kind of easing the curse off, your character will start suffering effects of the abyss. So early on, this will take in the form of like, hey, your character will like puke, and you'll a lot of your hunger meter and your stamina will deplete. The hunger meter is very, very important and essential in this game because having the more hunger meter that you have, the faster that your stamina will refill, um, and make it so that you can like travel between zones. Because in this game, like each map that you like teleport into, like into each zone of the layer, like it'll take a certain amount of health or hunger from you to go into them. And if you don't have the proper amount of like health and hunger, you can't even move into that place at all until you get that much. And if you completely drain the hunger meter, you'll no longer you will no longer replenish stamina, and you won't even have like the strength to like swing your weapon. So you're very, very, very vulnerable when your hunger meter is totally depleted. So suffering the effects of the abyss early on, like it's a setback, and it's one that like could be fatal if you let it creep up on you in the wrong place at the wrong time. When you're in like the deeper layers of the game, it can have even more severe effects where just like in the source material, if you let the curse like really get to you in the deeper layers in the game, this manifests into like you start hearing hallucinations of like characters talking to you in the abyss. You'll also start your it'll mess with like your character movement in the sense that up is no longer up, down is no longer down. Like your character will move in random directions, depending on where you tilt the stick. So movement becomes way more unreliable. It's kind of um, mimicking like that disorientation that you can get from the curse. And depending on the layer, you can also be brought to like the brink of death because your character will just start bleeding everywhere, and like it'll drain pretty much all your health and hunger to like the absolute brink where like you're not dead, but if you don't heal in the next like 2 seconds, then like you're gonna die pretty
What
much.
happens if you end up not managing to make it back, or you don't manage your curse, and you end up failing? Like, does the
So
game checkpoint? Do you just like revive back at camp like on an older save, or what?
so it does auto save every time you move into a zone. So you'll just load up. So the penalties for dying aren't that severe. You'll just start at the beginning of that zone again, which is kind of weird because like you cannot manually save in the abyss unless you have like these things called mail balloons, which are effectively like ink ribbons in the Resident Evil games. So, like, you can do manual saves through consuming those, but like, you don't really need to use much of them because the game will auto save for you and at the beginning of the zone. So it kind of betrays a little of, like the survival aspect of that. So it's not too severe, but you can you can technically soft lock yourself in the game if you don't have the proper resources on you, um, to just generally survive. So like let's say you die and like you auto save back into the beginning of the zone, but in the beginning of the zone you had no more hunger meter, you had no more food left to cook, you had nothing on you. Like you're in a state where you can't really like do anything, and because you mismanaged like your resources. Like at that point, you would have to like just choose the give up option, which will teleport you back to the surface, but it won't save any of your progress that you made in that run. So that's kind of like the way that you can kind of like
Well,
get
at
out
least
of
you're
there.
not. At least you're not like stuck on your complete file. Like have
Yeah,
absolutely no way out.
yeah. There's also, and there's something I didn't know many hours in, but there's like always a fast travel system in it, but it works in a weird way where like normally how I thought, and it's like it's tedious, but it makes sense in in my mind in the context of the world where as you progress through new layers, as you're going through whistle levels, like let's say I got my moon whistle and I can go to the third layer. um when I'm diving into the abyss, it'll let you fast travel straight to the third layer as long as like you got to the entrance of it at least once. So you can fast travel to the entrance of the third layer with the moon whistle, and like it'll to deplete um hunger and health from you. As you progress whistle ranks, it'll deplete less and less from you, but it'll still take off a good chunk from the get go when you just unlocked it. So, uh, I always thought that like, okay, if I'm in the third layer, I'll just do the things that I need and then travel back up manually on foot every time through the second layer and the first layer and then out of there. And like that doesn't sound fun, and I get it because like you have to start like mapping out like efficient routes, fast and efficient routes of like, okay, what's the quickest way to ascend the second layer back to the first layer, and then what's the quickest way to like get out of the first layer back into the surface. You're kind of going through your maps and doing, okay, this zone links to this zone, which leads into this zone, which will get me out of this layer quickly. So I just have to make sure that like I'm good on resources and mats to like cook along the way if I need it to like for the return trip. It's like the return trip was always like a kind of like a big deal of like making sure that I had enough resources for the return trip back. How it actually works in the game once you understand the fast travel system is that you can fast travel up to higher layers from the most completed layer that you traverse. So let's say I'm in the third layer, I can go back up to the nearest second layer zone, and once I'm in that zone and the second layer, I can fast travel back up to the first layer and it consumes my health and hunger in doing so. But it'll teleport me back to the beginning of the first layer, and then from there I can just get back up to the surface immediately because at the beginning. So that's how it never really tells you this. And like I had to like find that out. I was like, oh, like my friend like filled me. It's like this is how the fast travel actually works. Like this is what I read, but like, can you test it out? Because I already completed the game. I'm like, okay, let me go try that out. And I'm like, oh shit, it works like that. And like I never knew. Like it never tells you outright. So it's kind of one of those weird things where like, yes, this is more convenient, and I get it. Like this is like this is more convenient, and like it's kind of good on the surface as a video game, but as I stated in my review, it kind of betrays the essence of like the Made in Abyss experience of like traveling up the abyss and how daunting and how tedious and how much of a struggle it is, because now you just have like this fast travel option to like.
And it sounds like they try to account for that by making it consume your health and hunger meter a little bit, but still it's kind of a gameplay convenience more than anything else.
Yeah, so it's kind of a weird thing that. But other than that, I think I pretty much said everything I needed to say in my review. Where I don't think it's a great game for like total newcomers. I think you have to be like a fan of the source material to really enjoy it, unless you're really like the type that like tries out every single survival game. This does have some neat ideas with how the curse mechanics kind of surface, because you have to really think about like traversing vertically up in this game, because it could be a struggle at times. But so that's kind of like an element that like you don't have to consider in other survival games.
Mm.
And I think it's kind of a lot of effort went into like making this game. It's definitely made by people who like the series. I just wish it was a little bit more polished and a little bit more well thought out, because I think a lot of the game flow is a little bit. It's kind of it's one of those weird things where it's like it's hard translating Made in Abyss into a video game experience, and they do a decent job at it, but it's still kind of it's still the progression of it is still not as engaging as I wanted it to be. I'd say I think the most fascinating thing about like the community of this game, because there's like a small but dedicated community in this game. Um, when this game was first announced with screenshots, the very first screenshots of this game has a very different UI, and it was a very much more hardcore survival game where it had like separate gauges for like weather, humidity, even for things like a piss meter, a poop meter, a fart meter, and like hydration and wind levels. Um, and like you see some of those elements in those screenshots, and like people who have data mined this game have been trying to re-implement these systems back because it's like these are like triggers in the game code that like they're trying to like get back into the game. Like I think some of the modders as of this point have like re-implemented like weather in the game, and now they're exploring whether they can try like it, implement some of these cut features.
So
like
as soon
make
as you
it,
started mentioning those things, I started pulling up some of our oldest screenshots that we have on our like website's back end, and I do see like a symbol that looks like a toilet seat, and I'm
yeah,
like, oh, I guess she's not kidding.
yeah, yeah, and it's like gonna be fascinating to see like how far they get with that because I think this will be a really I really want to replay this game when all of those like with those features back intact and seeing how it would if it enhances or changes up the game experience in like in a significant way because I think that'd be really interesting to see. So Godspeed to those people who are really digging in there. But yeah, I think this is definitely one of the more challenging reviews I'd say I'd had to write because I had to balance out like what is cool from a Made in Abyss fan perspective and what is like cool from a video game perspective because a lot of those things in those from those two things like do not mesh well together, so trying to like give like a fair and balanced like perspective on each of those things was like one of those. It's like at some point you got to give on like what is fun in a video game, right? So it was a really neat game to like kind of mess around with and complete. It's an okay game. I think it actually sold like decently in Japan as well. Interestingly enough, so I'm curious to see like if they consider it a success or not. Because it's made by Chime Corporation, and they previously made like a ReZero game that like I don't think anyone liked, from what I remember. So I wonder if this is like uh, a success on their end, saying, "Oh wow, this sold way better than expected."
Yeah, it'll be interesting to follow sales updates on this game because it did kind of come out at a decent time, but still in a way where it could easily fall under the radar. I don't know, like, even though I think based on the source material, a survival game seems like absolutely like the proper way to tailor it rather than just making it like a turn-based RPG, though it sounds like some of the things that hit well with the theming and some of the things were just not, were just maybe undercooked. So it'll be interesting to follow this and see like if it was able to reach outside of like people who have no attachment to the IP. Are they going to even take a second look at this, or is it only for people who see this and be like, "Oh yeah, I watched that show. I'm interested in this." So obviously we'll keep tabs on it and we'll see if they report on whether or not it's done well enough for itself or not. And yes, go ahead and for both of these games, for Made in Abyss, Binary Star, Falling into Darkness, and for Steelrising, to these early September RPG releases, we've got the reviews up on the site. And thank you to both Adam and Josh for getting the chance to cover kind of both of them at length before we get swarmed with the autumn of Square Enix or whatever else is coming up on us in late September and into October. We have a couple little gaps here to talk about a few other games that people have been poking at before we go into some features up on the site and the news of the week. This is another game that Adam, I guess, was playing in the gaps, and we'll just talk about it kind of briefly here because it's not really in the RPG space. Well, kind of. Adam, while after or before or during, I don't know when you squeeze this in. I don't know when you squeeze most of the games in. Playing Kudelka and Steelrising, you've also managed to play through another classic game that you hadn't played before, and that is Parasite Eve, and I think a little bit of its sequel. Just kind of briefly, just because it is a little bit outside of our normal wheelhouse. And we don't always get the opportunity to talk about these more classic games. Just what made you decide to play Parasite Eve and just kind of like some of your quick thoughts on it?
So I think it was last week's podcast, right, where I talked about Kudelka.
Yeah.
And, it's a relatively short game, 15 hours or so or less. I talked about, its kind of horror elements and things like its confined scope and character cast and things like that. And, obviously there are a lot of games coming out soon that I'm interested in, like Biofield and Valkyrie and whatnot. But, I had some time to spare, and I was still kind of in that mood, I guess. And so, like, Parasite Eve was a game that I know a lot of people adore and love. I just had never played it, and I knew it was only like 10 hours long. It's not a long game. I'm like, I can fit this in, right? Why not? So I did, and it's excellent. It's a great game. It's perfectly paced. It's similar to Koudelka in ways that it's got like the horror element to it. I had a little bit of a misconception about what the game was, though. I kind of felt that, just from having not played it, that it was more like survival horror than RPG. But the first game is pretty strongly an RPG in terms of levels and stats and random battles and things like that. It's not a traditional turn-based RPG for sure, and it's got, a survival element kick to it, but it's more RPG than I expected. If you're not familiar, which, I was only vaguely familiar with the game is set in New York City, and you play a cop, literally, named Aya Brea, who is basically a relatively new recruit at the NYPD, and the premise of the game is you go to an opera concert, and everyone catches on fire. Everyone dies except for Aya.
Like self-immolates?
Or her boyfriend's alive. She kicks her boyfriend out before
well, yeah, but he flees. She's on a date with like a nameless boyfriend, and then like literally the people even say like, is this spontaneous combustion? And it kind of is. But like she's the only one who doesn't. And then so people are like, she becomes a suspect, like, well, how are you survived and no one else is? And then basically she's like, well, since I'm the only one who apparently can get to the bottom of this, I will. And from there you kind of learn about like the premise of the game, and the villain is basically a parasitic organism named Eve. And it's a great game. It's got great RPG elements to it. It's like I said, it's perfectly paced. I think the localization is surprisingly strong, and for a PlayStation 1 game, it's got a visual style that's similar to like Final Fantasy VIII in terms of character models. So it's got that kind of style to it, and I think you should play it. Like, you can beat it in a weekend. It's a pretty great game. Now, my misconception I had about it being more survival horror, that's actually the second game. That game kind of tones down the RPG and turns up like the Resident Evil. It's pretty much like a Resident Evil game with like an RPG kind of twist to it. So that's kind of like what I thought the first game was like. It's actually more like the second game, which I haven't beaten, but I'm going through. I don't think it's as good as the first. In terms of, the style I'm not as fond of. It's just, that's more maybe a preference thing, but it's definitely different in the type of game it is. It's got the tank controls where you can only either rotate or move forward, and you got to control that way. Chow was actually watching me play last night, and I'm running into every fence post possible. But
are they developed by the same team?
Yeah, they're Square Enix.
They're
Squaresoft.
They're Squaresoft, right? I actually didn't realize that the first game soundtrack was largely Shimomura, and the second game is Mizuta. So
that's fun.
It's also fun actually seeing, like, reading the credits of the first game. Some of like the people I recognize, like for example, Tetsuya Takahashi, he worked on the game map.
Hell yeah!
And then Hideo Minaba, he worked on the UI. Stuff like that. It's like, hey, I recognize these people. Takahashi, obviously, basically the boss of Monolith, and Hideo Minaba is a very popular artist.
Everyone from humble beginnings, so
yeah, it's fun seeing those in these older games. Like, they worked on this in just like a very smaller fashion, like on the UI or on the map. But yeah, the first Parasite Eve, I think, is, it's kind of catapulted itself as one of my favorite PlayStation 1 games. I
think the best thing I do love about it is the gun customization, and it's like later on, it's like I got like basically assault rifles that are shooting shotgun shells. Just like you can do all kinds of weird customization to it.
Yeah, it's pretty versatile in that way. It's pretty cool. Like, I think the mechanics, they're not too simple to just be like run and gun, but they're not too complex where you have to like min max or be super arduous about how you build up your gun. You can if you want, I'm sure, but it's pretty flexible and versatile and just kind of letting you do what you want. And usually it works out pretty well. The game, kind of like Koudelka, is pretty much all fixed camera angles. So you're basically running through these maps that are basically either pre-rendered or just just kind of like one angle of the map that you get to see from a fixed perspective. But yeah, it's really good. The second game Oddly enough, I feel like the localization is kind of worse or weaker because like the dialogue style is a bit different. This is just a small thing, but it feels like the text boxes are bigger and there's just more quips between characters than anything else. But anyways, it's still a pretty good game. It's just very different. One of these days I'll play Third Birthday and see why.
I was actually going to ask, like, so all right, if you play 1 and 2, you're going to play Third Birthday, right?
Well, I play Third Birthday.
I know some people Third Birthday say. I know some people with Third Birthday will say like the story sucks, but the gameplay is good, and that's always like,
Is that your opinion,
all right? The gameplay's all right.
The story sucks and the gameplay's all right. What a
that's why I always criticize Toriyama, because I think he's the head writer of it, even though the game's directed by Tabata. But yeah, I dislike Third Birthday just because they just shit on the characters in the previous games. There's a game that on the GameCube that's very similar to the Third Birthday, because the main gimmick in the Third Birthday is that you can hop into other soldiers' bodies and take over, and you could just keep swapping bodies until, like, using that as a gimmick mechanic to get through the game. So I'm not trying to remember a game.
Mario Odyssey. I don't know.
Mario Odyssey?
I was joking. You could like take over things with a hat, right? I was joking. I don't know.
Yeah, but that's kind of like the same gimmick. You're like using like Aya's ability to like go into the host of another body, and that's also the premise of the game, where you're kind of like time traveling, where you're sending your body or your mind to take over somebody's body in the past to change the timeline.
Yeah, but it's I'm going to try to beat Parasite Eve 2 shortly here, and then we get into an even thicker deluge of games coming out soon here for the next several months. So not sure if I'll get a chance to play Third Birthday anytime soon, if you're anticipating that.
I think the hardest part about playing the Third Birthday is the controls. The PSP is not designed to play this kind of game.
Are they better than the tank controls I'm dealing with?
They're better than tank controls, but without a right analog stick, it's very hard to aim. You know what I'm saying?
It doesn't have like a lock-on, a snap lock-on.
Yeah, but if you want to get the most precise shots that you need a right analog stick, man.
Yeah, but you don't really need precise
shots. My like memory in my hands of like the PSP nub are like like starting to fade, but now they're like creeping back. I'm like, oh no, the nub or whatever. Oh, that was terrible. Remember when the original DS didn't have like a right stick, and you had to get like an add-on, like what would they call it, like a DSi Pro add-on stick or something?
I have one of those.
You're thinking of the 3DS. I think the
does the 3DS have a
it came with the Resident Evil Velvation thingy. I think I bought
it. Didn't come with that. It was an additional thing, but it was like the first compatible game.
I had to
the Circle Pad Pro. Wow, my brain is like finally remember. It's like
we're getting old, guys.
Yeah, I actually have that attachment somewhere, like the 3DS big ass bolt-on attached thing of like that has a right analog.
Yeah,
it's surprisingly comfortable.
It was like for a Monster Hunter that I wanted to play. That's what I remember.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Adam, for spending 2 weeks in a row talking about some classic games that you've been able to enjoy with us on the podcast and share your experience. We have one last little window here, just a quick little one about some other early September games that Josh has been able to poke at a little bit. One of these is Jack Move, which is, if I remember right, a kind of an indie cyberpunk turn-based RPG that came out on PC a couple days ago and is slated to come out on consoles later in the month. And maybe there's a couple other games. So I think, Josh, you just had a few other things like Adam that you were just kind of poking at in between releases in early September.
Yeah, I put about like an hour and a half to 2 hours to Jack Move so far. I've been really enjoying my time with it. This is made by developer So Romantic and published by Hype Train Digital. The main character's name is Noah. She's like a
Wait, it's not hacker. Jack?
No, it's not Jack. Jack Move is an actual like mechanic in the game. Like
gotcha.
Jack in.
Okay. Like a Mega Man battle.
Yeah, like Mega Man. Yeah. It's a turn-based. It's inspired by JRPGs. It's like the main story is that after a short tutorial, like gameplay section, Noah receives a phone call from her dad. She has like a pretty bad relationship with her dad because ever since her mom passed away. Like her dad just kind of like became very distant with her, so she's kind of living out on her own now. And her closest like family member is her uncle. So one day, she kind of gets a call from her dad saying, "Hey, they fucking found me. I need help." Like basically, like the feds found him. And he's like involved in shady business. She kind of dismisses it as like, "Oh, it's probably whatever. Who cares?" And then shortly after, her place gets raided by the feds. Like they're trying to look for. You're not exactly sure what they're looking for yet. But the like your dad was involved in like some pretty shady research from the government's end. With they need some data that only he possesses. So you basically are on a quest to like go find like, hey, where did they take my dad? What do they want for him? Trying to, discover the truth of like what was like my dad up to essentially. Um, Along the way, like this game is like this is one of those games like kind of like Bravely Default where you can adjust like all the encounters is like random encounters, but you can adjust the encounter rate on like how frequently you want to engage in battles, or you can turn it off entirely in the game. But it does note like, hey, if you're turning it off, just understand that there will be mandatory fights in the story that like they won't scale it down or anything. It's like you have to be prepared for them. Um, Fights, play out like you have a turn order. So far, I don't have any other party members. It's just Noah herself. Um, and you kind of have like a HP bar, an MP bar, and a Jack move bar, which is like kind of like your ultimate. Um, and so each of your besides your main attack, you can like set up like your skills as like modules. So like they frame it as like it's software that like you install on yourself because you have like this device. I forgot what the device is called exactly, but you kind of have like this deck on you, and you at first like you have like these sealed off RAM blocks, and you have to either equip equipment that'll free up RAM blocks or buy like or buy certain stuff to like free up RAM blocks permanently for that device so you can install skills on it because skills take up a certain amount of RAM on there. So right now my skill set is stuff like a healing spell and attacks or spells that'll like do certain elemental damage. The elemental damage is like instead of like fire, water, earth, ice, or whatever in a game, this one is like cyberware, wetware, and I forgot the other element off the top of my head. But but there'll be a whole system where like certain enemies, like wetware enemies, are um, vulnerable or weak against cyberware attacks or stuff like that. So like my basically skill set right now is like making sure I have like one of every spell so I can hit weaknesses if need be. And I recently got like a spell that like enhances my defense against all those elements as well.
Maybe I'm dumb and I don't know the terminology, but what is wetware?
I don't know, WET ware. I don't know. The wetware enemies like inflict
Oh,
like
here I got it.
have, like, poison.
Wetware is a term drawn from computer-related idea of hardware, hardware or software, but applied to biological life forms.
There you go.
All right.
Yes.
The prefix wet is a reference to the water found in living creatures. Wetware is used to describe the elements equivalent to hardware and software found in a person, such as the central nervous system or human mind. Thank you, Wikipedia. This article that I'm reading says it has several issues that need help. So, grain of salt. Makes some sense, though, I guess. Like a biological analog to software.
Yeah. As you're fighting in battles, you'll gradually increase like the jack move gauge, and when it's full, you can execute a jack move attack. And when you initiate this attack, it'll do like a very simple like rhythm game that'll enhance its damage when you get all the inputs right in a time window. So like the first jack move that you get when you initiate it, you press down 3 times in perfectly, and it'll do like a big AOE cyberware attack to all the enemies. It does have an option in the game if you don't want to engage in those or you're not good at those. It'll automatically input those for you perfectly every time if you don't want to deal with it, which is all right, fine. And yeah, the right now it's been a lot of fun. It's a very low stakes sort of like RPG. It's not like a very big expansive world. Like there's uh there you can undertake quests from NPCs. It's kind of like right now it's a lot of like, hey, I'll give you this item for like another item, and then you needed this item for another quest, and that quest might give you another item for another quest that you need. Um, and it does have like a little bits of lore. Like this game takes place in the year 2120. And then the big significant event that people talk about in the past of it is in back in 1997. There's a big like electromagnetic like incident that like powered like that messed with all the electronics on in the world and like shuttered them off. And that time was called the Dark, um, which is all right, sure. So it's been nice. It's been nice just having just like a simple but effective like turn-based RPG like on the side. I might do a review, I might not. I just kind of bought it on my own and just yeah, it's been great. And then the developers have already stated on Steam that like yeah, thank you so much. This the first day sales of this was like way it's been doing very well so far. So it's nice to see it. And then like people generally enjoyed it on the Steam reviews as well.
Yeah, it's sitting at very positive right now. So
yeah, so if you're just looking for I think like the average play time of this game is like around 10 hours. So if you're the type that like, hey, you want to play an RPG but you don't want it to take that long, you don't want it to be like a fucking 100+ hour RPG like Xenoblade, this is like on sale on Steam for not that
as someone that
not
took
much.
a month to beat Xenoblade, like literally 4 weeks, I was like, oh, that sounds music to my ears.
Yeah. So this is I'm excited to continue it when I find time, but I've been having a lot of fun so far with that. I've also been trying out the open beta for Torchlight Infinite. This is a new Torchlight game, but is not made by from the creators of Torchlight. It is made from I think a Chinese company called XD.
Didn't Torchlight 3 also have a different developer?
Torchlight 3's developer was thrown around a few times.
Yeah, I don't know the exact history of the Torchlight 3. I just know it was bad and all iterations of it.
From what I remember, Torchlight 3 was originally going to be like a free-to-play like spin-off by some Chinese company. I forget the exact one. And then somewhere along the lines, they just decided, oh, it's Torchlight 3 now. And they kind of used that original free-to-play game as a base. So obviously a lot of the issues are down to that.
Yeah, a lot of people did not like I had a few like a friend go and like try out the closed alpha or closed beta Torchlight 3. He's like, this is dog shit. Like it's like he is someone who didn't like Torchlight 1 and 2, and like he's like the Torchlight 3 is like even worse than those somehow. And like some people like do like to have their fans of Torchlight 1 and 2. They're like relatively simple action RPGs and released at a time when like action RPGs were like a kind of like on the not really on the upswing. They were kind of like not many of those were made at a time when the original Torchlight and Torchlight 2 were out.
Torchlight 2 on Steam
was like the biggest one like at that time.
Yeah, Torchlight 2 on Steam has 30,000 reviews, 93% positive.
Yeah, a lot of people like
Torchlight 3 on Steam has 10,000 reviews, 47% positive.
Yeah, it's so I didn't even know that Torchlight 3 was able to like come out for real, but okay.
Well, it's because it was like James said, it wasn't Torchlight 3 until like...
It was like Torchlight Frontiers or something.
Oh, I remember that very vaguely. Yeah, then they decided like, oh no, we need to like boost this game out the gate. It's 3 now. Yeah,
so I mean, a lot of people like Torchlight 1 and 2 because they like they're not really hardcore action RPGs. They were pretty accessible and like like especially Torchlight 2 is like one of the big ones that people gravitated towards to like play with friends because Torchlight 1 didn't have any multiplayer. That was more like a dungeon crawling experience at the time. But they were okay games. Like I didn't gravitate too like much to them, but like I played both of them and completed both of them. So I was like, okay. And when my friend said stay away from Torchlight 3, I'm like, okay, I will trust you on this. So he went into my friend tried out the closed alpha of Torchlight Infinite, and he's like, this is surprisingly good gameplay wise. Like he's a big Path of Exile player, and Torchlight Infinite basically is like Path of Exile light. They lifted up a lot of systems that were very much from Path of Exile, along with certain things along the way. The weird thing is, Torchlight Infinite is primarily designed for mobile devices. This is the first. This new open beta is the first time they're trying out their PC client, so it's fairly bare bones on like the perspective, the features end of it, because it is taking like a mobile game stance and perspective first on like their development. So a lot of like the UI is kind of like I don't know, and the way it's like it's monetized is weird because it's like there's also a closed beta where they're trying out and they're testing out the real money like transaction sort of so people can spend money in that game. None of the progress gets carried over the full game, but it does support like 100% like full rebates on their purchases in there. So that's weird, and like a lot of the monetization is it in it is like cosmetics like character skins, weapon skins, weapon auras, character auras, your footstep effects, your teleport effects. Um, it also, it also has a gotcha in it. You're not gotching for like weapons or characters or anything, but there is like these things called like pack spirits, which are basically pets. That
They're like diet Digimon.
kinda. um, so the rares and the commons will have their certain stat boosting things and like give you like certain modifiers to like a pack spirit skill tree that'll like it'll give you like better resistances, more crit, slightly more attack, and so forth. But then there's like a legendary pack spirits that you can like roll for that like also have skills as well. And I've never rolled one, so I don't know exactly how much they impact the gameplay experience. But I guess that probably is significant enough that like it will make a difference. As far as I can tell, this is primarily a single player game, though you do see other characters in like the town hubs in it, kind of just like roaming about. And I think from a gameplay standpoint, it is probably like the most fun Torchlight in the sense that like there's a lot of like customization on like the way you want to play it. So like there's several character classes in the beginning. There's like your standard warrior. There's like I saw like a dwarf that was like I think like some sort of like mechmancer that can like have like mech minions with him. I forgot the other classes, but I chose like this character that's like a kind of like the mage archetype in it. And like the their standard thing is like the first things they give you is like here's a ice spell that like fires off like an icicle, but then will give you like a modifier to make it into multiple projectiles. And then this person can like do blink, can like weaken enemies to put them in a vulnerable state. And like their class gimmick is they can like summon a doppelganger of themselves that also has like a field around them, where if you stand in that field, you'll attack much faster in it. So you're putting out more damage while in that field, and this doppelganger will follow you around once they are summoned. They'll occasionally attack as well. So um, it's kind of like a robust system because there's a lot of like progression systems in this game where certain like quest rewards aside from like your typical loot reward though like they'll give you like a spell, and like spells are kind of like used as like almost like their own currency where like you can pick one of these three spells and then like you can and then once you have that you can equip it onto like your skill hotbar at any time. And then along with these spells you can also unlock spell modifiers to um to like kind of shift their properties. So let's say I have like this electric ball that bounces around. Well, I can like I might get a modifier that like it'll cause corrosion damage, and then another modifier that like might grant it like a fire field and each time they bounce. Um, and it's all very detailed on like what their exact effects are and what they modify in it. Alongside
Kind of reminds
that,
me of Diablo 3 spells or abilities.
mhm. Yeah, I'd say it's more versatile than that, but yeah, it's the general idea on that. And then like it's even stuff like my blink ability. My blink ability, like okay, it'll like teleport you a certain distance, but you can modify it so like once you use this blink ability, you can like gain these buffs once you use it for a short amount of time, and then you can kind of like stack on like more and more like sorts of like different modifiers on that blink ability. And this like for each of like your spells, even like your restoration spell as well. And then there's also a skill tree that like has like these three like skill progressions. Like one is very much like to enhance your damage, one is for like survivability, and then once you invest enough skill points in that skill tree, you'll get like these major like kind of like gameplay changing things that'll like modify certain aspects of the character, like whether they're like if you invest in this skill, like you'll get like a bunch of like frost damage like when enemies are around you. So like you kind of are more buff when like there are enemies around you, which might be a class defining build or some sort of build that you're going for. And then on top of that, after you reach a certain level threshold, you have the option of investing into another entire skill tree, a new skill tree. So my secondary skill tree now invest instead of like damage, I'm investing into like mana regeneration and energy shield enhancements. So my survivability is better. And then that'll have the same thing. Like once you invest an amount of skill points at this skill tree, you can unlock certain things from this skill tree. And all of these things, whether it's the skill tree or like uh, all these enhancements, like the skills that you equip, you can freely like kind of shift around at your will. And then the skill tree, it's like infinite respec until level 75. So a lot of this game is about like trying to like experiment about what feels good to you, but can also feel overwhelming as well because there's so many like systems at play and like stat modifiers and element modifiers and like of course it's not even touching into like loot and all that and like what kind of loot will like benefit your build. So it's very but it's very proactive and like in the way that like you play in the way you play it as an action RPG. Like right now, like everything is like kind of done in service to like buff up my damage and my survivability because all I'm doing in the game right now is I stopped like the stock like ice spell that has projectiles that bounce between enemies that do a lot of damage, but it's firing off very very fast. I have certain skills that seal away like my max mana for buffs. So like if I want uh like this movement speed enhancement, I seal off a certain amount of my mana to gain that enhancement, which is a similar system that was introduced in Titan Quest, where you can like seal mana for buffs. You see these in other action RPGs as well, like Path of Exile. And but I don't have to worry about my max mana going down because my mana regeneration is so fast that I don't have to worry about, who cares if I don't have my max amount of mana because I have all the mana resources that I need, like cast all my spells along the way. So it's just a lot of like managing kind of like what you want to do, and the game does provide you the tools to do that. I am sort of a little worried about like okay the right now obviously I'm playing it for free. It's gonna be a free to play game. Will it ever try to like will it have content to like try to goad you to like spending money like in a pretty not feel good way, not above just cosmetics? We have the gotcha for like the pets, like oh you need this pet to like make this fight easier or so forth. Like I wonder if it ever gets to that point. I have no idea. It is kind of weird. It is also weird that there are. This one feels especially scummy, where there are two different forms of auto loot in the game. So right now, I have to pick up all the loot that I want manually because if you want auto loot, you have to spend any amount and you'll get the auto loot function. But I think there's like a second auto loot that will have your pet pick up like valuable like resource mats, not just like equipment, but actual resource mats that drop automatically. And like I think that might be a battle pass reward and so forth. So this game has it like it has your standard like free to play elements of like hey you unlocked an achievement for doing this cool thing, claim this reward and that'll give you more like currency for to spin the gotcha. And then it also had like battle pass progression like oh you leveled up so you claim this, so it has a lot of those meanings of like you did a cool thing, claim this and all that as well.
Is this
So
like an open beta right now, or is
yeah,
it invite only?
it's open beta. You can just request access on Steam. It'll invite you immediately on there to try it out. I think it's going up till the 19th of September, I believe. And yeah, I think I really could not care less about like what's going on in the story or the characters. Like I just like whatever things are happening. Okay, I think the main hook of it is the gameplay and the gameplay progression and like all just many ways to like customize your playstyle in it. It's gonna be it's gonna be for people who really like customizing their action RPG experience.
Yeah, and tinkering and like managing numbers and buff uptime and things like that.
Yeah, so it's good for that. Everything else is kind of whatever. The voice acting in it, I don't know if it's placeholder or not right now, and it's just kind of horrid. I hate all the voice acting in it. I hate all the clips my character makes. Yeah, and it's been a decent time. I don't know if I'm gonna stick with it much longer. Honestly, like I've been kind of playing through it here and there. I have like a level almost 30 character. I'm just like, I see the appeal. I really wonder if like the final game product will be a more polished, touched up experience to make it more coherent. Because right now, it just throws a lot at you. With the explanations for them aren't that great, I'd say, and a lot of the UI just feels unfinished. Like you'll have like stuff like improper like capitalizations or stuff that's not capitalized at all that kind of like just feels cheap it makes it feel cheap in a certain sense too. But I really wondered to see if this will find like a community and how well it will do. I might give the final thing a shot, maybe not. But right now I feel like I've had my fun. I have a decent grasp of like what this game is going for.
Before I saw you playing this a little bit when you were streaming it internally, I did not even know that Torchlight as an IP was alive. Like I kind of thought that Torchlight 3 was like a death knell, and then like, oh, there's another Torchlight game. What? It kind of looked when you were streaming it like how I'd expect it to be, but I do kind of see like a glimpse of the depth that's there based on the equipment and the like the sub creatures that you have and the build styles and the spell customization. So maybe it might end up being like a bit of a surprise and a bit of a rebound after the disappointment that was Torchlight 3. And with that, I think we basically capped out for the first time in several weeks our games talk section. We had sections for new games, sections for old games, section for games that are not quite released but are in an available playable demo mode. So I think that works out well for this week, because this week, even though there's a bit of news, is news light compared to next week. So next week we'll probably flip the script and talk less about games we've been playing and focus more on what comes out of TGS. As a review, go back to the website to check out the reviews for Steelrising and for Made in Abyss, Binary Star Falling into Darkness. We do have one other feature on the site that I want to talk about at least briefly. It kind of depends on how much James wants to talk about it, because it is something that he was able to put up on the site kind of as like a feature / PSA for a later September release. This is the official English localization of The Legend of Heroes Trails from Zero. As we know, when this game is releasing later this month, it is releasing on PS4, Nintendo Switch, and PC, with those two later consoles being specifically developed for the Western release. While this is not new news, there is a little bit of a discrepancy that has kind of flown under the radar between the different release consoles for Trails from Zero. So I don't know if I'll hand it off to James to talk about why he specifically wanted to kind of draw attention to this and what his feature on the site kind of covers over in terms of the official release.
All right. So first off, can I just say that it's absolutely insane how much hate I got for just letting people know about this?
Yeah, just to be blunt, people like there's like conspiracy, like you have it out against NIS America to like post this, and it's just like,
well, maybe we shouldn't. I buried the lead a little bit, but let's talk a little bit about what the crux of the feature is.
Okay. So, long story short, whether it was NIS America decided not to do anything with the PS4 version or they weren't allowed to, the PC and Switch versions of Trails from Zero are being handled by Durante's studio PH3 and are getting a number of enhancements. When in the PS4 version is just simply a straight translation of the Japanese release Zero no Kiseki Kai, which I remember when it came out had quite a few issues. It had lower resolution textures than the official PC version or the Vita.
Okay, before you continue, let's be careful about the way we word things here, because like when you mention straight translation, like we're not talking about the localization thing. Like the localization scripts for the game should be like
the same.
The localization script for the game.
Yes and no. because it seems like the chest messages from the Geofront release might only be in PC and Switch.
Okay, so like aside from that, the story dialogue, the quest, pretty much the localization scripts outside of maybe like the chess dialogue, will be pretty much the same between all the release platforms for Trails to Zero. What you're talking about is more of like the technical side of things, not like when you're talking about translation, it's talking about the technical side of things.
Yeah. But yeah, long story short, I saw someone retweet their original tweet from like last month talking about how the differences between the PS4 and the PC Switch versions. Durante himself did put out a Steam blog post like a few months ago, I think, detailing the upgrades to his versions of the game. Nisa themselves did not actually say anything until just the other day after the PSA went out. Gamatsu reached out to them asking, okay, so why wasn't this communicated? And all they got was a confirmation that it is indeed the case. I've had people say, hey, how'd you know about this? First off, you could check the trailers on the PlayStation YouTube and you could see that the textures are different from those same scenes from the Nintendo Switch like eShop page.
But even that before you go analyzing like trailers, like even beyond that, like Durante even mentioned it himself, both in his blog post on Steam and on the Reddit AMA. Like he stated out pretty bluntly that like, yeah, our company is only responsible for the PC and Switch release. That's all we can talk about because those are the versions we're responsible for. That's it.
And I'll just be blunt here. There was another reason or another way that I confirmed it that I can't really go into details. It wasn't through Nisa, but I didn't just post that article not knowing for sure if it was true or not. I knew it was true because I had already gotten confirmation. People acting like, oh, I have it out to get them and I deliberately put this PSA out without confirming it first. No, I didn't.
No,
obviously it's true because like Nisa's now outright admitted that regardless of the reason why this is the case, the PS4 version won't come with those enhancements that the PC and Switch versions do, which includes potentially the chess messages, but definitely the message log and the upscaled HD textures.
I think like the most like the biggest thing that people should get away from this, like going beyond whatever drama conspiracy theories that like haters will have, like to make them feel good about themselves, is like the bottom line is people deserve to know the product that they're getting. That should be something that like we should all agree on, that like people should be as informed as possible about the thing that they're purchasing for a good chunk of their money. And so all you really did was just like, this is not new news, but it's something to remind people like, hey, the release of this game is coming out in a few weeks. Just, be aware that like a version of this game is different from the other versions. And then you provide examples straight from Durante himself that like he used as comparison images for like, hey, this is what like the source looks like. This is our enhancements on it. It's not a matter of like what you think is better and what you think is worse. That's not really the main thing here. It's just like be informed about like what you're getting, right? It doesn't matter about what you think is better, what you think is worse. You can go for whatever the fuck you want. If you want to get the PS4 version, go ahead. That's great. You have fun with it. We're not saying like, hey, you definitely should avoid it. It's like just be informed like, hey, the PS4 version will have this stuff and the PC and Switch version is handled by Durante and they will have this stuff. And that's it.
Yeah, but people feel attacked if you look
at it. It's crazy. It's kind of stupid, honestly.
So many people assumed that because I mentioned, well, they either should have made sure that there was parity between the versions or like outright have stated that there was differences, that they were thinking, oh, well, you're blaming Nisa because ultimately Falcom was the ones that apparently didn't allow for the changes to the PS4 version. Which, first off, NIS America has yet to say that. Like officially, there's been potential NIS America employees on like Reset Era that are saying that, and that's probably true. But the company themselves haven't officially said that. And
they cannot
arguing
say that.
arguing over those semantics when the whole reason they're in this mess in the first place is because they didn't properly communicate this. Like people said, oh, this information's been out there. Nisa's communicated it. They didn't. Not until they responded to Gematsu, because like Durante said it on his AMA, but that was Durante. And he said it on the Steam blog post, but that was Durante. He's not an NIS America employee.
It's honestly, kind of been out there in like a contrapositive fashion where it's like, yes, we know it's releasing on these 3 consoles. Yes, Durante said he's only working on these 2. You can fill in the gaps, but it wasn't made explicitly clear. And of course, I don't think NIS America maybe had, or at least at the time, didn't see a reason to. They just said, hey, we're supporting these consoles and Durante is helping us with these new ports. But then you kind of had to like fill in the gaps. Like, wait, what does that mean about the PS4 version? Well, this is what it means. That's all the PSA really is. So this is what it means. Yeah. Like Josh said, it's the same version that Japanese players played. So it's not like it kind of almost becomes like a victim of Durante's proficiency in terms of like him having built a reputation for these things. And now that he's like stretching out and going into it, I think this is their first Switch project. It's kind of just like a victim of their own success. Like, wow, relative to this.
Did they do Nayuta as well?
No, Nayuta is being done by Falcom themselves.
Okay. Yeah, I was mixing it up because Nayuta got a PC release recently for the Japanese version that they did.
Why can't Nisa just do the same thing with like Kuro? Just release the game in Japanese and sell you the English patch later. Like,
well, that's an entirely different can of worms. Like
that's getting off the topic. To be honest, it's like why can't they do this? It's like there's many reasons why, but that's taking away from the main perspective here.
And personally, with how much shit I got just for like letting people know about that discrepancy with Zero, I don't want to touch like the Kuro stuff with a 10-foot pole at this point. Please don't make me talk about it.
Yeah,
I think the fan base is a little bit too.
I mean, to be clear, once again, to be clear, like I said, it fucking sucks that like people got after James for this, and those people should be really ashamed for themselves for doing this. But to be clear, the majority of people who responded to us on social media about this topic was saying, "Hey, thanks for the heads up."
Yeah, I saw there were 90% or more of the comments were like, "Whoa, I had no idea. How do I switch?" or whatever. And obviously, some people were like, "Well, I didn't know this, but I don't really care," which is fine. But we're just it's just information.
That's fine. That's fine. You will. Yeah, that's fine that they don't care. That's totally. If it doesn't matter to you, it doesn't matter to you. Okay, life goes on, and it's cool for those people who didn't know. Like, hey, now they have a more informed decision for it. Like, don't take this as like, oh, the entire Falcom fandom fucking sucks. So it's like, no, there's like in every fucking fan community, there's good, cool people in it that are helpful and kind, and then there's also the people that fucking suck and like are too way invested in the fandom and get very defensive about it. And unfortunately, those people are the loud and vocal ones. And because you hear them so much, that's what you think those few bad apples are characterized the whole thing, and that fucking sucks for the people, for the genuine good people in it.
Yeah, that's with most things. I mean, most people just pay attention to the negative feedback. You don't really pay attention to all the good, right?
I am looking forward to our first October podcast where we can just discuss Trails from Zero as what I think is a really good game.
Exactly.
Trails from Zero is great. And then this can all be kind of in the past. Just let this drama flare up, burn out, die down.
Yeah, this feature should and always have been just like, hey, PSA for people who don't know, and then life moves on, and those people are, more informed. If anything, like I sort of wish that like the image that Gematsu posted as a response from Nisa, I wish Nisa like publicized that in a more officially, saying this is our statement, and then out into the public from their direct channels themselves.
Or maybe they just want to be deceit about it, so that
Well, I understand it from Nisa. Yes, Nisa should have communicated, but I understand that if it is the case that it like they don't want to damage the relationship with Falcom, and this stuff should have been negotiated way before Trails from Zero was announced officially. The marketing plan for this should have been negotiated in a more thorough fashion, so people are more informed way before this, right? And so I understand it from right now, where Nisa is like, we can't really address it directly because if we say it as it is, it will imply to Falcom that they have the quote unquote inferior version because they're the ones who worked on the PS4 port, and while we're offering more quote unquote superior versions of this game. It doesn't matter what you think is better or worse. That's I'm putting in quotes because a good chunk of people don't care, and that's fine. But there are definitely versions of Trails from Zero coming that have been modified by a third party that for some people is better, but Nisa cannot communicate it like that because it will feel like they are throwing Falcom under the bus and undermining their efforts, And all of this should have been negotiated and communicated way well in advance of any of this. Before Trails from Zero was even announced at that Nisa Falcom event stream thing.
Yeah, it's like as soon as they knew that they weren't going to be able to have the same enhancements on PS4, that should have been the first thing they said. And it's like, just nothing else to say. Like, well, actually, the people that are it's not on our site, but I've seen comments everywhere where people are like, oh, well, those screenshots you had in those comparisons, that's not actually the PS4 version, even though it's literally the comparison shots that Durante made to showcase the differences between the PS4 version and the enhancements he's made for the PC release.
People are just delusional at this point, and we'll
that's kind of like a nitpick of a nitpick where it's like this is representative of the PS4 version, even though the game is developed on computers. Initial screenshots from several games are from a PC build. You know what I mean?
It's the closest thing we have to an official Nisa comparison between their two versions of the game.
Yeah. It's like, this isn't actually the PS4 version. This is just representative of the PS4 version and everything that it looks like that I put together for comparison purposes. It's just like, come on, guys.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I don't want to belabor the point, and I kind of want to have a more optimistic look at Trails from Zero finally coming out in the West, even though I know that there is baggage on it. So yeah, hopefully that is water under the bed. That's not the right metaphor, but I'll stick with it.
The bridge.
Under the bridge.
Wow.
Under the bed. I just have water under the bed here.
We're back in the early 90s where we have water beds now. But yeah, looking forward to Trails from Zero. Yes, the PS4 version will be the Kai version as it released in Japan, only with the English script, obviously. It'll be interesting to see how meaningful or quality of Durante's updates to the Switch and PC versions. I am excited to kind of see like what it looks like on Switch, because Switch was kind of like this. That is like the one thing that the NIS releases have been beneficial for the series, is to get them back on Switch and kind of like preserve that Vita legacy that the game kind of has, that the series kind of has. So I'm interested to see how this game does on Switch. I assume Colin will be playing it on Switch, though I don't know that for certain. I'll be playing it on PC.
Switch's strongest warrior.
I guess since you brought up Colin again, just heads up, he did get paid by NIS America for his work on the Geofront project.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Every time we bring it up, every time we bring it up,
just for transparency. All right, so with that, I'm going to put a pin in that, and we'll go into the news section of this podcast. I know we're a few hours in now. This news section is backloaded with a lot of release dates, so that shouldn't take too long. We had a few updates that we'll go through at the start here. Some of them are kind of teasers and announcements, but there's not a lot of meat to chew on here, but we'll go through them. What we're going to start out with is another Kickstarter project for an upcoming RPG series. And this is kind of on the heels of the Penny Blood and Arm Fantasia Kickstarter. And this is for a game from Shoji Meguro, who we have talked about, who is now a freelancer, longtime Atlas composer. Late last year, I believe it was late last year, he announced his indie project Guns Undarkness, which is like a third-person shooter JRPG cyberpunk hybrid. It's really hard to describe. You kind of have to watch the trailer and the footage, because there is no easy comparison to say, oh, this looks like a spiritual successor to X or Y. It's really kind of its own thing. So if you go back to the original announcement from 2021, early November, we got our first initial look at this game. We kind of knew that it was a long ways out, something that we wouldn't see in a while. Well, recently we saw that this week, we're recording this podcast on the 10th. On the 12th, so by the time you're listening to this, or around the same time, Shoji Meguro is bringing Guns Undarkness to Kickstarter. They have an initial goal of $30,000. The Kickstarter will run for over a month. Basically, this is trying to get feedback from the fans, help realize his vision. I don't think when this game was originally announced that there was a lot of indication that it was going to have any crowdfunding of any sort, but ends up being that is what it is. So go ahead and look at the Kickstarter for Guns Undarkness. It's kind of hard to speak to because as the time of this recording, the Kickstarter is not live, but by the time you listen to it, it likely will be.
I think at the very first announcement of Guns Undarkness, like I don't think it was intended to be a crowdfunded thing. I think somewhere in development, they were saying, "Hey, we just need a bit more money to cross like the finish line to like get the like aspects of this game to like a certain level that we want." So it's very much like, "Hey, we just need help from the community to get it where it needs to be." So I'm interested to see like what exactly the specifics on this Kickstarter because it'll have stretch goals as well. They're saying on the press release that like if it hits its initial goal. It'll be coming to PC, but then there'll be additional stretch goals to bring it to Nintendo, PlayStation, Xbox platforms. And then, once again, like with any Kickstarter, do not take the tentative release dates as the actual release dates on it. These will probably be like delayed a few more times because game development is very hard, very tricky, and usually never on schedule because unexpected things just pop up. But they did mention that the upcoming Kickstarter will have a tentative release date of December 2023 for that game. And once again, do not take that as a firm, solid release date window. That's just what they are expecting at this point in time, not necessarily what the reality of it is. And they shared more, gameplay and story details, and a bunch of new screenshots and artwork that they'll have on the Kickstarter when it goes live. So, for people who wants to help Meguro out, look out for that in the coming days, or if not already up, if you're listening to this podcast. And once again, this Guns Undarkness will also have Russian illustrator Ilya Kovshinov. Sorry if I mispronounced that. He did work on the Wonderland and Ghost in the Shell SAC 2045, and of course. Everyone's favorite rapper in the Persona series, Lotus Juice, will be helping Meguro out as well on this project, and they were announced when it was first unveiled as well last November. So best of luck. I respect Meguro saying, "Hey, I like just decided I want to go freelance, and because I want to make my own indie game," and that's really cool that he's able to embark on this and. Best of luck. He seems to be really giving it his all. From like following his Twitter and giving development updates of like him working on it day by day.
Seems like this is the month of Kickstarters. Have anyone seen this Kickstarter called Tears of Magic from like a month ago?
It looks like Breath of Fire.
It's supposed to be like a Breath of Fire successor.
I have heard about it. I didn't.
The only problem with this is that all these other Kickstarters are like from the original developers, where this is like from fans. It's like,
yeah,
well,
which can end up being good, but yeah, just in the same, the crowded stage, limited space to breathe.
Yeah, I guess since we're on the Kickstarter talk, I went to go check where the Arm Fantasia and Penny Blood are now as of the September 10th, 1:09 p.m. Pacific. They are at $1,343,307.
So about twice the original goal.
Yeah, almost. Yeah, just about twice the original goal. They've been clearing, some more stretch goals for Arm Fantasia. They have like role changes, 20 puzzle boxes, more BGM, a bounty system, and they
new characters that fans can decide what they look like. I don't know. I feel like that interferes with the creator's original vision. It's like, here, we'll let the fans do a poll of what you want this character to look like.
I mean, they already said like the development team liked a lot of like all three of them, so they're letting fans decide. So I mean, it is what it is. Those projects are still far off from releasing, and how
all of these, anything Kickstarter like for that Guns Undarkness December 2023, like huge pile of salt on that one. But I think these are it's just cool to know that it's not. Especially for the Penny Blood and the Arm Fantasia. Yeah, they're not technically Wild Arms or Shadow Hearts, but just to know that those creators are working on something, they're cooking away. I think it's just a little bit of like, okay, that's something to look forward to, even if the release window is very nebulous and far off.
Yeah. So,
and then obviously going back to the topic here that we started with, knowing that Meguro is kind of, spreading his wings and trying something that he has been passionate about. And yeah, the initial goal for Guns Undarkness is not too high. So it seems like it'll be something that should be able to clear its goal pretty easily, I would hope.
Yeah, like I think I think a lot of people have like some weird like I don't think that this is not a Kickstarter goal to like fund the entire project. I just think they need a little bit more money to realize like to just polish this thing up and and work on it with like with security
gauge interest and things like that.
Yeah, I don't think there's like one to like I don't think that's like an initial like funding goal of like trying to get a publisher on board. It's more so, hey, we actually need these funds. But we'll see how the Kickstarter words it as of this time. And yeah, once again, like very interested to see. I want if anything, I want to hear the soundtrack for this game.
Yeah, obviously, based on who's behind it. We're obviously very clearly into the marketing ramp up cycle for the November release of the new Pokemon generation, Scarlet and Violet. Over the last couple of weeks, we've talked a little bit about some of the piecemeal marketing. Like we had the Grafaiai Pokemon reveal a couple weeks ago. We had like the pre-evolution of the Cycle legendary a few weeks before that. We got another new trailer this week. This week is a little bit more general and broad scoping, basically talking about 3 different like story progressions in Scarlet and Violet. So obviously Scarlet and Violet has been purported to be more open-ended, a little bit more open world, taking some cues from like Legends Arceus, obviously. So we got a new trailer for the game that pretty much covers the game in 3 key fashions, and one of which is the typical gym challenge, which it kind of goes over a few of the characters you'll meet there, specifically the grass gym leader. It talks about the new evil like henchman organization in this game, which is Team Star, and a little bit of how you interact with them and how the combat is done a little bit differently when you interact with Team Star. It uses like a new like auto battle sort of function where your Pokemon will behave outside of the like turn-based battle system and still like
auto battles. Let's go. Just having Pokemon play themselves and level up themselves and get experience for themselves. I don't have to like manage them.
Yeah, they talk about the auto battle system in conjunction with like the Team Star interaction. So I don't know if those 2 things are explicitly linked together completely, or if there's just a good avenue to showcase both. But yeah, there's a little bit of footage where it shows that the trainer kind of directing their Pokemon in like a direction, and they just kind of engage based on their stats and clear the battles without going into the actual battle UI. And then the last thing it talks here outside of the gym, like the gym challenge and the Team Star, is helping I believe he's a Professor Arvin. He's either a professor or just another character, try to fight Titan Pokemon and come up with like ingredients and herbs. And there's this giant crab whose name I'm forgetting right now. I'm trying to poke through the trailer and find it. That is described as being like way too large compared to what he normally is. Klawf, Klawf, Klawf. The Stony Cliff Titan, and he's grown to a giant size. And this is part of interacting with this new story beat where you're gathering ingredients for this character Arvin. So I kind of like this trailer, and it also showcases several other characters, like other gym leaders or characters they encounter on the gym challenge, is because it kind of gives a little bit more concrete direction into like, well, if this game is open-ended, what do you do in it? Because obviously Arceus had like a story that took you from region to region. It looks like that based on this trailer, there seems to be basically 3 kind of ways that you can progress in Scarlet and Violet, either through the standard gym challenge, through the Team Star interactions, or through these like is there a wording for this Arvin ingredient gathering mechanic? I don't know if they actually title that in any specific way, but it kind of is a nice little showcase about like what do you do in this new paradigm of Pokemon game, and it kind of gives a little bit of details on that and what to look forward to. And on top of that, it gives us a weird new look at like the gem version of Sudowoodo, which is kind of silly and fun. Looks like it actually uses grass moves under the new gemification. I forget what the actual mechanic is called there. Just kind of a nice little overview of Scarlet and Violet. Oh yeah, I guess I can't discuss what they showed this week without discussing like these new like Mega Man Pokemon that have had like fan art up and down. I forget what these Pokemon are actually called.
Armarouge and Cerulege.
Yeah, so people say that people have obviously been having fun with mashups, saying that they look like they're straight out of a Mega Man game, like bipedal mech inspired creatures, one that's kind of like fire based and one that's kind of more energy based. I've seen some people also compare them to Ethel and Kamarabi from Xenoblade 3. So
Nice.
they're very distinct looking Digimon that are kind of fun.
There's distinct looking Digimon, huh?
Or Digimon looking, they look like Digimon. That's twice
Okay.
that I guess I just say like the people from Torchlight Infinite look like Digimon. These look like Digimon. I don't know what looks like a Digimon. I guess I go to that well too
Everything
often.
looks like a Digimon.
If it doesn't look like a Pokemon, then it looks like a Digimon.
Okay, you're right.
That is 100% of what things can look like. Yeah, I don't know if there's anyone else has any other feedback about some of the character bios that we got and some of the artwork. I do like Croft. He's a silly looking crab.
It's yeah, I'm really interested to see what people think about this game. I don't know yet. I feel like I have to like the only way I'm gonna play this game. I feel like is like if friends are like we're all getting it and we're all gonna play online together. I'm like okay. I feel like that's the in for me. Other than that, I'm like I don't know. I'm not really into Pokemon. I tried Legends Arceus and I was like I'm not even into this either.
Changing tacks entirely, we also got an announcement for something that we've kind of been expecting for a while, but didn't really know it when it show up. At least I don't think we would know it when it would show up. And that is the first named like DLC / expansion pack for Cyberpunk 2077. Obviously, we've talked about Cyberpunk a few times on recent podcasts, namely due to the Edge Runners anime that is premiering in the upcoming week. As part of that, Cyberpunk, as it has been since its release in 2020, does have a new major update coinciding with the anime release, version 1.6. This update looks like it's mostly cosmetic based. It includes a new like mini game that involves the Witcher horse character Roach. But then we did get a teaser for next year's big content drop, and that is Cyberpunk Phantom Liberty. Now, as far as I can tell, we don't have a lot of details on what Phantom Liberty really is, except for a 1-minute teaser, basically showcasing the character V taking some sort of oath to serve the United States, which is kind of like vague, and there's really not a lot there to like extrapolate what that might even mean or what Phantom Liberty
will back. That's the big takeaway for this trailer.
Yeah, and I know we've mentioned on this podcast a few times that Adam and Josh and maybe a few others have just kind of had this kind of in their backlog. Like at some point I'll get to it. Maybe Phantom Liberty, by the way, will be releasing next year for current gen console, Stadia, and PC. That's really all we know. The 1.6 update's available now. They did also include like a trailer for the 1.6 update, but it doesn't really talk really about like what this update includes. It's just more flavorful, kind of like meshing the anime and the game footage together. Go ahead.
Yeah, the big one for people in this update is a transmog system, so they don't look like.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, they can actually like be fashionable and like have good stats instead of like looking like monstrosities and dressing like monstrosities.
Yeah. Cyberpunk 2077 somehow launched in a state where like the Pro ZD skit where it's like, this is my ass kicking outfit, bitch, where you just wear whatever stuff gives you the best stats. And since it's first person, you don't see yourself most of the time anyway. Whatever, you might get yourself a glimpse in a mirror or something and be like, oh God, that's what I'm wearing. So yeah, now there'll be a transmog system. I guess it does very kind of coyly state that there will also be new additional weapons, quests, and secrets to uncover. Who knows what those are? I actually do have like a guide up on the site that has like the vehicles and all the weapons that you can stash in your like apartment. I'm like, oh, I'm probably gonna have to boot this game up at some point and make sure that those are all still up to date. Maybe I'll do that when the Phantom Liberty expansion releases next year. So
all I got out of this is I guess I'm just gonna be procrastinating more and more on Cyberpunk. I guess until the expansion, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't blame you. Like, I'm like, I kind of want to see what this game, because I haven't played it since like mid 2021, so it's had a year of patches. I think I played it like 1.2, and now it's at 1.6. But it's kind of like, well, if they're just going to keep tweaking and improving it, might as well just sit on it and wait. And then, yeah, in your and Adam's cases, and whoever else is still waiting on it, might as well wait for the Phantom Liberty stuff to come in too.
Obviously, Adam and I will just watch the anime and then call ourselves Cyberpunk fans.
Yeah, I totally want to have a section next week on the podcast about anime impressions. does that kind of cover us for major news? I guess we do have a couple localization announcements that came out of that NIS Presents or NIS Presents that we talked about.
Yeah, we technically talked about those last week. Basically,
because
everything
it was leaked.
Yeah, everything was leaked. Did in fact get announced. I mean,
yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
so the main two headlines.
I was wondering if we would get a date for like Trails to Azure. Oh no, we instead got a date for Raiden 4.
Are you excited for Raiden 4 Mikado remix?
I'll just listen to the soundtrack.
There you go.
Wow.
I love how quick.
I'm looking forward to a lot of those. I want to replay Grim Grimoire, so I'm looking forward to that.
I wonder. There's one thing with that game though. Did you play the original PS2 version? I
played the original PS2. Yeah.
There's one thing that really bugs me. If you played the original PS2 version, if you set to Japanese voice, they didn't correct the lip sync. They modified it to the English version. You see the characters' mouth flaps.
I don't think I played. I don't think I played in Japanese voice. I played it way back when.
Aren't they just 2D?
Yeah, but their mouths will flap with the voices, and they actually syncs up pretty well in English. But in Japanese, it's a complete off sync, and they'll be like, it throws me off because it's not matching their voices. I just wonder if they would like fix it for like the remaster or like just keep it as it is.
I assume they're gonna fix it. I'd have to imagine, but you never know. We'll see. Yeah, and let's see. Yeah, I think everything outside of Void Terrarium, because I don't really know much about Void Terrarium. Like, I was like, something's like, maybe I'll check it out. I don't know.
So the main two headlines that are kind of in our wheelhouse in games or series that we've talked about in the past is that a tactical RPG that we've talked about as it released in Japan in like January of this year, and that was Shikabana Garai no Bokun Meshi, will be releasing next year in the West for PlayStation and Nintendo consoles as Monster Menu: The Scavenger's Cookbook. We got a trailer for this Western localization announcement, kind of showing some gameplay and some of the characters, customization options. So a tactical RPG that has a food like buff based focus to it and a very cute art style that's kind of Disgaea-esque. So I know this is something that I think James said that he had some interest in when it was announced for his Japanese release.
I actually like imported. I just haven't gotten around to playing it.
Mm-hmm. So it'll release at some point. Spring 2023 is what we have currently listed right now. And here's something that I know.
I'm pretty interested in the Void Terrarium too. The first game was pretty much just like a mystery dungeon game.
Yeah, and then that was the next thing I was going to go to, is that we obviously, because it released in Japan in June, we were aware of Void Terrarium 2. Adam has covered and talked about on the podcast his impressions of the original Void Terrarium, a dungeon crawling RPG where you take like the role of like a robotic protector of a girl in a terrarium.
It's like a Tamagotchi.
Yeah, kind of.
Only no, it literally is. Like in the game, you literally get like a Tamagotchi screen of Toriko as you're out and about, and it helps you monitor her.
Yeah, so Void Terrarium 2 will be released also in spring 2023, and we got another announcement trailer for that. It doesn't show a lot of gameplay. It shows basically just kind of like the same theme of the game will carry over from the first to the second. So it will probably be a pretty straightforward sequel. So I think Adam's interested in, well, Adam basically said that he's interested in this game in some extent. So these will be two little, quirky, interesting titles to look forward to from next year that we kind of knew were coming at some point, because NIS America pretty much brings over everything that Nippon Ichi brings over in Japan. But now we got a release window for them and some trailers to accompany those announcements. So still kind of starting to populate the expectations for releases for early 2023. So we'll add these two NIS titles to the list. And then I think 2 weeks ago, we talked about a blog post on Square Enix's Dragon Quest Treasures, specifically talking about how the treasure gathering mechanic worked. Didn't have a trailer accompanying it, just screenshots and text details. Well, we got another one of those blog posts this week that's specifically talking about monsters. So it talks about recruiting monsters. It talks about monster rarities, how they range from like bronze, silver, gold, and I believe rainbow as the highest. How different monsters have different kind of like field skills, almost like launching, flying, digging, things like that. There's a couple new like variants of classic Dragon Quest monsters that'll be debuting in Dragon Quest Treasures, like the Marble Slime, which is like a slime which is kind of like a slime creature that has kind of like the stratified like layers of like sedimentary rock. It says a desert dwelling slime. All the sand that it swallows builds up inside its body to form a beautiful stratified pattern.
New slime. Hell yeah.
We got a new version of like the classic Dragon Quest Saber Cat, and Fiery Dragling, Valhalla Vulture. Oh yeah, those field skills that I mentioned earlier in game are called Fortes. The ones that I talked about, like I kind of mentioned, were Glide, Launch, Sprint, Stealth, and Scan. It talks a little bit about how the recruiting mechanic works, how you might mark a creature, and then we'll have to give it like an array of items in order for it to be recruited. It does talk specifically that there are some like story-based creatures that will kind of recruit automatically outside of this system. The one example that it gives is Uzabella, which is like a slime that is pink with a ribbon. So there's a couple slimes that seems like that you'll kind of get outside of the standard mechanic. And then it does talk about how based on the species of creature, some of them have like inherent attributes, but then they're also unique in their own way based on the specific creature that you're recruiting. And you can preview these before you decide to give them or not give them the items. So just kind of a very, for those that really like to dive into how gameplay mechanics work ahead of release, just talking very specifically about as a game that was originally envisioned as a Dragon Quest Monsters game, but kind of spun off into its own thing. Not surprising that it has a monster recruiting system so heavily embedded into it. So we've got the blog post kind of copied up on our site talking about how the specific mechanics work for the monster recruiting in Dragon Quest Treasures. So that's all up on the site. Before we get into release dates and delays, we have a couple smaller little things here. I'll start out with this one because we kind of knew this was coming. We did get the final pair of character trailers for October's Star Ocean: The Divine Force. This includes the dapper Midas Felgreed, who is like an older gentleman who is also very buff and also wears like a very fashionable pink top hat. And then we got the character Nina Deforges, who kind of very specifically is a healer character who wants to learn how to cure a very specific disease. It's mentioned in her character trailer, but I forget exactly what it is. But yeah, she's joining
or something.
Yeah, I forgot the name of the disease she mentioned in her character trailer.
Oh, the disease.
Cure Helgar's. So Helgar's disease. Yeah, so these are the last two characters that we knew that we're going to get introduction trailers for. Just like all the rest, it's like 50 seconds of just like game dialogue spliced over game footage in a kind of a haphazard manner. So nothing too inherently exciting, but hey, we've got the full set yet now. And when you include the 7th party member Malkia that was revealed recently outside of these, so maybe we'll get an introduction trailer for her too, but I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't, because she was kind of introduced within the gameplay trailer for her race, which are the Virians. So now we've got all the characters introduced. So now maybe the next time we see this game, it'll be some of the stuff that Adam wants to dig into, like the
last like long trailer showed a lot of the combat-y stuff, and they're going to show more. And that's what we mentioned. They're going to show Welch and probably customization and crafting and whatnot.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. They might show crafting and stuff.
Yeah, they said they're done with the combat. They already said they are definitely gonna go to crafting, and they teased Welch at the very end of the last one. So yeah, we'll see how what sort of fucked up crafting they'll have in this one. So yeah.
Here's a game that we have not covered this year. It is a first-person RPG, almost RPG immersive sim hybrid that from a Russian studio, Mundfish. This is Atomic Heart. We've covered this back when it was announced. I don't remember when those was originally announced, but the first major coverage we have was from the Digital E3 2021. So the first time covering Atomic Heart this year is that it now has a new publisher, that is Focus Entertainment. And alongside this, we did get a new combat trailer for Atomic Heart from Gamescom. So a little bit like this kind of leaked in kind of late from the August Gamescom window, I suppose. So I do know that Atomic Heart, since we haven't covered it frequently, I'd kind of forgotten about this. And it's still only slated as for like a general winter 2023 release. But however, Adam pointed out to me, like, this game does seem to have quite a following for it. This new combat trailer that came out for Gamescom 2022 has like 5 million views, which is kind of surprising.
Jesus.
Wow. I guess this game has a following that its sphere might not intersect with ours so completely, so it can kind of fall under the radar. But yeah, this combat trailer shows like 4 minutes of some pretty like gruesome, almost cyberpunk-esque / Prey, maybe like 2016's Prey type environment to it. And yeah, it's a game that might be out within a year. So just it's kind of cool that Adam had the chance to. I believe Adam covered this one for the new publisher announcement for Focus Entertainment. So yeah, we've got that up on the site. Obviously, want to give it its due here. It looks like it could be pretty fun, and I enjoyed Prey, and Cyberpunk had some redeeming qualities. So if it's anything like those, it might be something to kind of keep an eye out for 2023. And then here's a little bit of a footnote here. We did get our first. We expect that Xenoblade Chronicles 3 will have, due to its expansion pass and the support that Xenoblade Chronicles 2 had, plenty of post-launch updates and support behind it. Well, we did get one of our first major free patches for Xenoblade Chronicles 3, finally fixing the broken food effects and missing like Gogol items that prevented people from completing certain of the Collectopedia cards. So this update is not really a content update. It's mostly bug fixes, but specifically targeting
tailored for Adam. That's what it is.
Pretty much. So now the cooking effects
before release. So like very, very minor, but in the game, the Gogol enemies can drop like specific fruits. And you only use them for like Collectopedia card stuff, so you can totally ignore it easily. But I was just for like completion purposes, like let me try to find all these, and I can't find these two. Where the hell are they? And like, oh, they didn't exist.
So apparently some of these items like didn't exist. Plus, there were some food items. I don't know specifically which ones, if it was only canteen ones or only Manana ones, but some of them were literally placebos. When people compared like their CP or EXP gain before and after eating the item, it seems like they're all fixed now. It's the way it's worded in the patch notes says fixed a problem in which various effects were not occurring correctly for dishes other than baked spongy spud or sunny style fish pie. So maybe out of all the food items, only 2 were working correctly and the rest weren't. But so this was something that I know had bugged some completionists like Adam. So here they are, they're fixed. Hopefully this means we can kind of get the, I guess there was a few other quests that had like potential for being in. I just kind of like how this is worded. Fix an issue with the battle with the mysterious raider and the severed connection quest sometimes did not end. I just imagine like getting into an endless battle. We're like, oh, is this supposed to be like this? Am I supposed to die? But
there was an interesting like sequence break where like one of the enemies, unique enemies like graves that you can only access in chapter 6, like this upper region in Atia, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you can beat them early, if you can, and then their graves would show up in a region that you couldn't normally access until chapter 6. So people were having skips on that. I don't know if it like how badly it affected like progression, but like that was definitely just something that like people mentioned in that this patch too. I was like, no idea.
And now we're going to get into new release dates and some release date delays. Here's a game that we've covered previously, I believe, on the podcast. Another indie game for the later part of the year, Mana Finder. Mana Finder, we knew it was going to release this year at some point. We got an official release date for it. It will release on October 5th. It is a pixel art RPG that looks kind of like it has like a Pokemon style kind of aesthetic to it from the overworld, or almost like Zelda-like actually. But just another indie game to keep an eye out for early October. We got a release date for Astergios Curse of the Stars. This is kind of a I don't know if this is an indie game, but I don't recognize the developer, Acme Game Studio. It's an action RPG with a Greco-Roman setting. We've gotten a lot of media over the year from it. We had a gameplay trailer back in April. We got some boss fight footage from June. We also got an announcement trailer late last year. But Astergios Curse of the Stars will launch also in October on the 11th for pretty much all, I shouldn't say all consoles, no Switch, Xbox, PlayStation, and PC. Here's one that's a little bit more topical. We got a release date for the second kind of DLC pack for Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin. We've talked not that long ago about the release of Trials of the Dragon King and kind of our feedback for how it was implemented into the main game that released back in July. Well, for the second set, we've got Wanderer of the Rift is coming to Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin on October 26th. Alongside the announcement of the release date, we got a little bit longer than a minute long trailer for it, clearly showing who I suspect is supposed to be Gilgamesh, and it kind of teases his theme, the Battle of the Big Bridge. It doesn't really talk about anything other than the theming of this being a labyrinth of dimensions, a dungeon that randomly configures to your path to unlock pieces of the story. So it kind of seems like a more procedurally generated thing that might lead to some new boss fights at the end. So I'm guessing that this... Go ahead, James.
This is pretty interesting because they also specifically mentioned that they will add Blue Mage as a new job, because and then this will be more of like a beast tamer summoner role almost, because having a proper Blue Mage class would be weird because of the absorb mechanic that was already in the game, where you could absorb enemy spells and fire it back at them or other enemies, which is kind of a standard trait for Blue Mages. So this game will have kind of a twist on the Blue Mage trait and MO, I suppose, which is interesting.
So now it's almost like Beast Tamer.
Yeah, and they also mentioned that there'll be new equipment that'll have new abilities, and then a new class of enemies called Chaotic Monsters, which kind of reminds me of Sunbreak's whatever monsters. I don't know if it's going to be that. It's probably not going to be that, but just that's the first thing that popped into my mind.
One game that was originally going to release in October was Monochrome Mobius Rights and Wrongs Forgotten, from the Aqua Plus and Shirabune, the Yuchawara Mono spin-off / sequel. Pretty simple update here that they just simply tweeted out without a trailer or any other fanfare. Due to a case of coronavirus on the dev team, they were pushing back Monochrome Mobius for about a month. So it was going to release on October 20th. Now it will release on November 17th. I don't know if this kind of clears up, or is this better or worse for James's schedule, considering when Kuro 2 releases? Better. So James is looking
yes.
So now it'll just.
But my condolences to the dev team. I mean, it's a fairly straightforward delay. I don't think anyone can be angry about that.
Yeah.
If it's just frank and just we're gonna care for our health. We're not gonna push ourselves to stick to an arbitrary release date. So we're gonna push back and take our time and get our dev team to get better.
Exactly. Health above anything else.
Here's a delay that was already announced, but we didn't have a date. We talked about how Marvel's Midnight Suns was delayed to a very awkwardly phrased end of the fiscal year, and we didn't know what does that mean. And we got a new release date for Marvel's Midnight Suns, December 2nd, and alongside we got a trailer for that, which is pretty much just a minute-long general overview trailer, kind of talking about all the things that we kind of already knew about the game, about how you're creating your own character to interact with existing Marvel heroes, a little bit of combat footage, a little bit of the the hub gameplay, which is more dialogue heavy and things like that, a smattering of several heroes that will show up in the game. Pre-order to receive the Doctor Strange Defender skin. I don't know.
I'd say it's a better release date, though. It's less crowded around that time frame. The only other thing I can think of is Dragon Quest Treasures around that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. December will kind of probably fill in kind of late in the game here, but December 2nd, good release window. So it looks like they're not going to delay it to the absolute last possible moment. So hopefully this is just what they needed to get.
To be clear, though, this new release date is only for the PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC versions of the game. They still have not dated the Nintendo Switch, PS4, and Xbox One releases.
Which, if I remember right, is how they worded the original delay anyway. Yes. They said that the current gen consoles would be this fiscal year, which we now know means December 2nd. Last gen and Switch will be later in 2023.
I don't believe that Switch version's actually coming out.
I would not be surprised.
We'll see. I don't know. That a lot of people would be disappointed if that Switch version didn't come out. I think it's one of those games that I think people would like to play on the go.
And that kind of covers us for new release dates and release date delays. Obviously, we're looking ahead next week towards Tokyo Game Show, as we've mentioned several times. We've kind of gone over some of the publisher plans for the week, like Bandai Namco, and obviously Square Enix has pretty much a whole itinerary to themselves. We do know that on the 14th, that RGG Studios will have a summit stream for their newest title. I don't think they specifically said that this is a sequel to Like a Dragon, but I think that's what everyone's expecting.
Yeah, but the little clips that they kind of leaked out from that, was it the martial artist, the wrestler? I forgot. It was on that YouTube channel for that for
that influencer that got to like they're he's going to be his likeness will be used in the game, and he got to tour the studio, and as he toured and uploaded to his YouTube channel, we got our first real footage at like a Dragon 2 or whatever they're going to end up calling it, Yakuza 8 in Japan likely. So this is kind of an exciting and interesting time because it'll be like the first announcement from RGG not under Nagoshi, so it'll be under Yokoyama. And we know that they're working on like a Dragon sequel, so this will likely be that, but we don't know for certain. They haven't explicitly stated. So that'll be revealed on the 14th as a stream. We got a link on our news post here, so this will be something that we can definitely follow up on next week to see what is exactly announced here.
This is at the September 14th, 3 a.m. for Pacific.
I was gonna do like the conversion. I'm like, 1900 hours Japan
I got
Standard
it.
Time.
Yeah, I got you. So work around that. Yeah, it's gonna be exciting. I hope you see some cool things there besides Like a Dragon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe something will be a surprise.
We'll see. You know, and I guess looking ahead, because we did kind of talk about it at the top of the podcast, and I did math it out because there's a lot of like weird things about this the scheduling of this TGS that like people might not know. Like, so obviously before TGS starts, just at the beginning of the week at September 12th, there'll be a Daemon X Machina 3rd anniversary live stream, which is not really an RPG. I did write a branching path about it. I think the main thing that people might be looking forward to this one is they might maybe show footage of the sequel or follow-up to Daemon X Machina, because they did briefly tease and talk about it at a previous anniversary live stream that they were working on a follow-up, but not necessarily, you know, did it give a title or any time, like, you know, they're just saying, oh, they're working on it. So maybe this is the time they'll show it. You know, and then after that on the 14th at 3 a.m. Pacific, the RGG thing. For people sickos like me, at September 15th, 3:30 a.m., there's gonna be a Gundam game stream for TGS. So, you know, we'll probably know more about DLC for SD Gundam Battle Alliance. They'll probably talk more about the G Generation Eternal mobile game. Probably some Battle Operation 2 stuff. So, you know, for people who are into Gundam games, they'll talk about it there. Shortly after that, at 4 a.m., September 15th, this is when they go to Star Ocean. After that, it's going to be One Piece Odyssey. Then they're going to go to Capcom. There's actually a dedicated stage for an indie game that we talked about on this podcast a few weeks back, the Mato Anomalies game.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, that has its own dedicated stage as well on the 15th at 9 p.m. Pacific. So this is the weird one. At September 15th, 11:30 p.m., this is when Konami is going to do their new title announcement stage. This is different from a future Konami stream, the latest information special program. This is the actual one that like people will want to have to keep their eye on. This is the one hosted by Yuki Kaji, and I believe he was the Seiyu, the voice actor for Joey from Suikoden 2. So that's why people are speculating that this might be like some sort of remaster or new Suikoden announcement at this specific time. So that's definitely one I wanna, you know, be there for. See what they have on there. This is another weird one. At September 16th, 2 a.m. Pacific, 505 Games will have their upcoming new titles stream for TGS. This is different from another stream happening at the same day, but at 10:30 p.m., which is the Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes latest info stream. So I don't know if that 505 game stream will have anything new for Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes, because that has its own separate latest info live stream block way later that day. So no idea why they decided to separate these two. So shortly after that 2 a.m. Pacific stream for 5x5 Games, this is when Koei Tecmo is going to talk about their new Gust announcement and then the Wolong Fallen Dynasty game. At the same time that's starting, this is when the Saga series TGS broadcast is going to happen. I don't think there's much to really look forward to the Saga series broadcast outside of the Minstrel Song remastered at our end. I don't think there's anything else to talk about besides Reuniverse and all that. An hour after that at 4 a.m. Pacific, Sega will have their TGS live stream. I don't know if they're gonna talk about anything of note there besides Sonic Frontiers and the Persona re-releases. I don't know if they're announcing anything else. 6 a.m. Pacific, not September 16th. There's a Tales of Series official live stream. I don't know if they're gonna announce any new Tales games.
Well, like Adam says, he keeps thinking remaster announcement of some sort.
Oh
if
yeah,
anything.
yeah. What was he thinking? Like Adam, what were you thinking for like a remaster? Like, what do you think is like the next? Which Tales games would they go for?
I would think probably Zelia or Graces because they're already HD. They're early HD games, and they're kind of trapped on like PlayStation 3. So
yeah. I was thinking Zelia when I was thinking like a remaster I want to see, because that would be, I would assume, be bundled with Zelia too. But
yeah, it'd be cool if it was like the the Symphonia remaster was weird because it's like 10 years old now, but it came to PS3 with both Symphonia games, but then when it came to PC, it was just the first one.
Yeah,
kind of weird.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know.
But I would hope that they'd bundle it.
Also, I don't know why they did this, but there's a separate stream, Square Enix stream of Eiko Kano's Kurikano hit TGS 2022 special stream, which is, I think they're just gonna be like touring the booths for Square Enix, because most of the Square Enix dedicated game streams are not till September 17th. So we'll get into that in a little bit. After that, Square Enix blocked in with Eiko Kano. There's Street Fighter 6, which Chow and I will be keeping an eye on because that game looks sick. Hour after that, or no, not hour after that, later that night on 7 p.m. September 16th, there'll be a Falcom JDK band special concert, which is always great to tune in on because those people are fucking legends. Then this is when, the Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes latest info comes in later that night at 10:30 p.m. Pacific on September 16th. So I'm very interested to see what they have to share on Eiyuden Chronicle there. September 17th, 2 a.m. Pacific. This is where all the Hoyoverse stuff comes in. They'll have their own special program, which I assume they'll touch on Genshin, Zenless Zone Zero, Honkai Star Rail, probably Honkai Third Impact as well. So anything you want from Hoyo, it's all there. This is also the day the blocks when Square Enix starts getting out there. 2:30 a.m. Pacific on September 17th. This is where Valkyrie Elysium and Harvestella have their special broadcast. So, and then after that is Field Chronicle. And then later that night on 8:45 p.m. is when they're actually going to start talking about the Dragon Quest: The Adventure of Dai game project. So there's one app for a mobile game out for mobile game for Dragon Quest Dai. But there's also when they're going to start talking about Infinity Strash, which is the console game for Dragon Quest: The Adventure of Dai, which is, I really want to see more of that. So
it feels like that was announced forever ago.
Yeah. So they're going to come out there. And then 11:30 p.m. September 17th, you'll have Tactics Ogre Reborn, which is kind of like the last big block for Square Enix stuff. And everything else is kind of like non-RPG. You have.
Did you mention the Saga stream?
Yep, I did mention the Saga stream. That's
hell yeah,
September 16th, 3 a.m. my time. So
I look forward to sleeping through all of these.
Yep. I don't know. I don't know what I'm gonna do yet. I'll probably stay up in the morning for at least the 16th and 17th. I don't know about the others. We'll see. Let's see how stupid I am this week. If I sound like death on the next podcast, you'll know why.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, hopefully we don't sound too much like death. But yeah, next week's podcast, I have no idea what that outline will look like. Usually we have some idea, like, we'll cover this game or that game in this thing, but no idea what will come out of TGS and how much will be relevant to us, but probably a lot. So we'll buckle in and get ready for it.
Right? Like, there's like one of the most packed TGSs we've had in a while, and that's mainly because Square Enix just has a fuckload of things coming out.
Yeah, as we've covered on this podcast in numerous different capacities. Yeah, Square Enix is going ham this year and always has a presence at TGS. So those things combined, we'll probably have plenty of updates on all their titles next week from now.
So I'm excited. I'm excited for this upcoming week, and my body won't be excited, but mentally, I'm there for it.
Mm-hmm. And that covers us for what we're looking forward to. So obviously the RGG Studios new game stream, and then all the stuff that Josh went through for Hoyoverse and all the other TGS streams that we talked about a couple weeks on the podcast with Bandai Namco and Capcom and obviously Square Enix. So we will follow up with those once we know what drops, and I will look forward to seeing Josh's like midnight 3 a.m. Posts in our chat box about what ends up getting revealed.
Yeah, I'll be like, let's fucking go. Meanwhile, everyone's like fucking asleep. That's gonna be sick.
Well, thank you, Josh and Adam, for carrying the podcast for all the games that you've been playing, both new and old, throughout the last week. We're getting into a heavy release window into September from all the like Trails from Zero and the Pokemon games that are coming up, and Star Ocean and all the other things. Dio Field is one that I think could go under the radar, but I'm probably most excited for. We have the 2 reviews up on the site for Steelrising and Made in Abyss, so go ahead and read through those. We have all the details up on the site for like the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet news update, the Cyberpunk expansion, and of course the blog post for Dragon Quest Treasures releasing in December. You can find RPG Site on all the social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. We do have a Discord channel server, so go ahead and go to discord.gg/RPG Site or hit the link at the top of the rpgsite.net homepage. If you have listened to the end of this 3-hour podcast and you've made it this far, we'd like to hear your feedback. So if you listen to us either directly through our website or through something like Spotify or iTunes, go ahead and leave us an honest review. We'd like to hear your honest feedback and give us something to work towards, to know what we're doing well and what we could improve on. We'll be back next week with all the TGS news, as we've stated. So look forward to hearing all of that then. Until you hear from us next week, stay safe and take care. And we'll talk to you next time.